Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first council meeting of 2023. For our viewing audience, welcome, and obviously if you're viewing already, you're aware of this, but the meeting is live streamed and archived videos are available at www.kitchener.ca/watchnow. People interested in participating in this or any meeting can register online using the delegation registration forms at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. Any submissions that are provided are circulated prior to the meeting by the clerk to members of council and form part of the public record. As we gather this evening, I'd like to begin as we normally do by acknowledging that this evening we're gathering on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. And now I'd like to invite everyone to stand as they're able for the singing of our national anthem. I do want to acknowledge KW Glee. As you know, they produced this version of the national anthem for us for Canada Day in 2020 at the start of the pandemic. And just, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to see the young lady who leads the anthem in the video and others at their first performance at the Centre in the Square together with the KW Symphony since the start of the pandemic, and it was great to see them have four shows that were almost sold out, and just a tremendous group, and seeing lots of interest from young people who want to partake in the future. So that's excellent. Before we begin this evening's meeting, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge two significant moments. First, being the commemoration of the Quebec City mosque attack. Yesterday marked the 6th anniversary of the senseless anti-Muslim attack in a Quebec City mosque that killed 6 men on January 29th, 2017. Kitchener joined cities and communities across Canada yesterday to take a moment of silence to remember Ibrahima Berry, Mamadou Tanou, Barry Khaled Belkacemi, Abdul Karim Hassane, Azadine Soufiane, and Abubakar Tabti. We also remembered the 19 people injured, some severely, and the trauma these survivors experienced. The City of Kitchener joined fellow Canadians in reflecting on this National Day of Remembrance of the Quebec City mosque attack and action against Islamophobia. We condemn the senseless attack at the Centre Culturel Islamique du Québec and commit to the collective fight to end Islamophobia. Regrettably, this anti-Muslim act is one of many examples we have witnessed across our nation and in Waterloo Region. More recently, and closer to home, we remember the devastating vehicle attack in London, Ontario in 2021 that killed Madia Salman, Yumna Afzal, Salman Afzal, and Talat Afzal, and left her son Fayez Afzal injured and orphaned. And sadly, there was another attack today in Pakistan, and it just speaks to the fact that sadly places that traditionally have been utilized as places of peace and faith are being used for terrorism. That year, according to Statistics Canada, police reported hate crimes against Muslims rose 71%, and in our community, dozens of people reported incidents of hate or discrimination, religious or otherwise. The Coalition of Muslim Women KW reports learning of hate incidents and acts of racial discrimination, most notably in schools, healthcare settings, housing, and places of worship. This past week, communities across Canada were standing in unity with their Muslim neighbors in illuminating buildings and infrastructure in green lights, providing supportive messaging on signboards, and joining in the National Green Square campaign, which is organized by the National Council of Canadian Muslims and others. And you see a number of us wearing green squares this evening. In Kitchener this past week, Carl Zare Square at City Hall has been lit green, and this past weekend, all City of Kitchener community centers with digital signs were also displaying messages of support for the Green Square campaign. We continue to encourage Kitchener residents to join us in participating in this campaign and all acts of anti-racism and anti-Islamophobia to show that we stand with those working to eliminate Islamophobia, hate, and racism in Canada. And particularly on the Green Square campaign, more information can be found at www.nccm.ca/greensquare. Islamophobia and religious hate have no place in our community, in Canada, or anywhere. No one should be discriminated against based on their religion. Yesterday, today, and every day, we stand in solidarity with our local Muslim community as we remember the victims of anti-Muslim attacks in Quebec City and across Ontario and Canada. We also thank local leaders and organizations such as those with the Coalition of Muslim Women Kitchener-Waterloo, Muslim Social Services of Kitchener-Waterloo, and the Muslim Association of Canada, the Maple Grove School, and others who work tirelessly every day to educate our community and combat Islamophobia throughout Kitchener and Waterloo region. I'd also like to note that in a couple days, Kitchener will be marking Black History Month 2023 along with other cities and communities across Canada. Throughout February, please join City Council and myself in celebrating Black Heritage Month, a time dedicated to honoring the legacy of Black Canadians and communities and celebrating their continuing contributions. This year, we've updated the name of our celebration to mark Black Heritage Month from Black History Month. Celebrating the past has always been the focal point of Black History Month. However, Black Heritage commemorates past and present accomplishments within the Black community and sets sights on bright futures ahead. Black Heritage acknowledges the resilience and bravery of those who came before us, while also acknowledging the ongoing barriers to equity and inclusion that are still present within our communities. The City of Kitchener is committed to operating as an organization where racism is not permissible at either an individual or systemic level, and therefore recognizes February as Black Heritage Month. Black heritage is Canadian heritage. A deeper understanding of Black heritage helps us appreciate the immense contributions Black people have made to Canada and the global community, and provides insight into how best to address the systemic and persistent inequities Black communities have historically faced. I invite residents to join council and staff for a fireside chat with local Black leaders and allies to celebrate their success and inspire young racialized members of our community to consider a career in politics. This event will take place from 4 to 6 p.m. on Tuesday, February the 28th at City Hall in the Rotunda. Although it's important to acknowledge the month of February as Black Heritage Month, our commitment to taking action must continue all year long, both against anti-Black racism and systemic discrimination, while also building a society where Black futures and outcomes are a priority in our shared vision of an equitable community where all can thrive. As individuals, one way we can do that is by supporting Kitchener's small business community, and especially those owned by Kitchener's Black and racialized residents. Please make a conscious effort to support these businesses, both this month and year-round. As a corporation, the city has undertaken many steps to support Black, Indigenous, and other racialized members of our community. In 2022, the city's RISE Fund awarded more than $93,789 in grants to Black, Indigenous, and other racialized community-led programs, projects, and events, including an accelerator program helping Black, Indigenous, and racialized young women and diverse people aged 18 to 24 learning to create social impact initiatives or businesses to solve one of the 17 UN global goals, a hybrid after-school program run by the Association of Liberian Immigrants in Kitchener Environs alike, a software platform to support Black freelance hairstylists, gardens for Black families and home support for Black seniors, and a conference on financial planning, maintaining a healthy lifestyle and education. Kitchener City Council is committed to providing continued support for long-needed changes now underway within our organization through the work of our equity team. We understand that we have only begun this difficult but necessary work. We acknowledge we must do better and are committed to ensuring that Black and other racialized citizens in Kitchener have equitable access to the systems, support, and opportunities they need to grow, succeed, and thrive in our community. Please join me and all of Kitchener City Council in honoring, celebrating, and engaging with the perseverance, strength, and rich heritage of African, Caribbean, and Black members of our community throughout the month of February at the many events being organized throughout the community. Thank you. Before us, we have minutes for approval and on motion by Councillor Johnson. The minutes of the regular meeting held December 19th, special meetings held November 21st, 28th, December 12th, and December 19th, all in 2022, and January 9th, 16th, and 23rd, 2023, as mailed to the mayor and councillors, be accepted. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. You'll note the communication to file with respect to 3 different flag requests coming up throughout 2023. And now we'll move on to our first presentation, actually our only presentation, then we have some delegations. And the presentation comes from the World Council on City Data. And I'd like to welcome Patricia McCarney and James Patava from the World Council on City Data, who will be presenting a PowerPoint on the city's work with respect to ISO 37120 Platinum certification. And with that, welcome, Pat. As we said the last time we saw each other was at the World Urban Forum just prior to the pandemic. So great to see you here 3 years later almost.
It's very nice to be here in person. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, and good evening, Mayor Voronovich, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the WCCD, we're so pleased to join you here today in joining Kitchener to offer our congratulations on the City of Kitchener's WCCD ISO 37120 Platinum certifications. Platinum being, by the way, the highest level possible, so congratulations, and this is being for 2 consecutive years. So I'll just run through a quick deck with you. Mayor Voronovich, these 2 certifications tonight being awarded are a true demonstration of your city's dedication to building high caliber data that informs planning and management across the city and drives sustainable development in Kitchener and, of course, prosperity into the future for all of your citizens. While we're here today to celebrate these 2 certifications, this evening I do want to point out that this is the 3rd of 3 consecutive years of data, which is important, not only for seeing Kitchener in a global comparative perspective, but so importantly, this 3 years of data continuity is vital for tracking progress, for monitoring planning and management across the city. And Mayor Voronovich, I would be remiss if I did not address the incredible dedication of your staff across City Hall, all departments who so diligently reported this data over this last few years with us, including the expertise of Anna Maria Cipriani, who I know is here somewhere. There you are. And also the city's corporate sustainability officer, and then also under the amazing leadership of Kitchener CAO, Dan Chapman. the staff and support has been, and your leadership has been truly phenomenal, so thank you. And also knowing that there's a number of new councillors that we haven't met before, and people who are listening in tonight, I thought I would just run through a very quick briefing on what is this WCCD ISO certification, because it's a lot of acronyms and a lot of people aren't even sure what ISO is. I wasn't until I landed there in Geneva and haven't looked back since. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is that this ISO 37120, it's the first international for cities. It was for international standard ever coming out of ISO for cities and for city data. It's truly a global first, and we started with 20 cities, and we're now in 40 countries with over 100 cities being certified. So this is building apples to apples data so that cities can talk to each other for the first time in very strategic ways with this great data. It's all third-party verified, and we work with your staff to make sure it's in conformity with the standard, and these certifications really do represent the highest level of certification possible. Over 90 of the 100 indicators have all been approved through the third-party verification. And also to note, there are 3 standards now in what we call the ISO 37120 series. Since we first published ISO 37120 in the global first in 2014, cities started asking us, what about indicators for smart cities? What about indicators for resilient cities? So we went back to ISO, and we passed through several international ballots to come up with these 2 new standards. This third one is particularly pivotal. ISO 37123 is around resilience, which is very timely due to COVID. Cities are really stepping up to think about recovery, risk, and so it goes beyond just tornadoes and earthquakes and sea level change. It's also around COVID and health, the health pandemic. These themes, there's 19 themes which cities chose in helping us build this standard, so the KPIs are across all of these particular themes that all city halls have put up as priorities in our consultations. And I just want to now move to a very quick reference to, yes, it's great to be certified, and we're here to congratulate you, but it's how you put the data to work and how cities are starting to use this data that I wanted to share with you tonight. Because cities have started to step up in really strategic ways in all of the countries we work in. For example, we've asked cities, how are you using this data and how would you like to use the data? So the very first one is around economic development. Cities have said, almost all as a priority, the most popular thing that came back was, we said, do you want a sustainability index? Would you like a mobility referencing system? No, investment, attraction, and economic development. So we went back to ISO and started to talk about some of the gaps, and we built what we're calling an investment attraction tool. And we're rolling that out now to cities around these 6 domains, economic vibrancy, human capital, innovation, mobility and connectivity, state of the city, and livability. And so our ECDEV officers, we're working with Miami-Dade, will be there next week to actually kick off one of the first tests of this new tool because their ECDEV people want to take it on the road and try it out with us. So I just wanted to let you know that this is something that we could work with Kitchener quite closely on. Another way cities are putting the data to work is around infrastructure investment. What we're finding and hearing back from our city members is that they're using it sometimes to brag about how great the data points look and the celebratory data points, but sometimes they're using it to say, look how bad we are because we need infrastructure investment. So they're leveraging the data to actually make a data-informed ask to national and provincial ministries and state ministries around the world. A third way they're using this data is around mapping to the global goals, which Mayor Voronovich is no stranger to on the SDGs, for example. We've mapped all of the data to the 17 SDGs, and we're also using it with the newest program internationally, the 2030 Agenda on Making Cities Resilient, and that's this partnership with the UN. Another final way that second final way that they're using this data is around internal tracking, internal year-over-year continuity to track how the needle has been moving. Once you have this certified data for 3 years, you can actually start to see really interesting trends, which we're going to show you in a second. And also for global benchmarking, you can actually start to see and measure how you're doing relative to peer cities around the world. So this is a really important way that cities we're helping cities to put the data to work. And finally, the last way that cities are using it, we're working with Markham and Vaughan and others as well on this, is helping them to map some of this data into their strat plans. So some of this, sometimes, as you know, strategic planning initiatives are, quite qualitative words, which need some data to give it some meat. So we help them to map this data into the strategic plan and to help them then measure how is the needle moving on some of our strategic planning initiatives. So I would like now to take a few seconds to introduce my colleague James Patava, our Vice President, who's just going to share with you a few of the data points. Some of them are really outstanding. We only had time for 4, but there's more coming. We're developing a report with Anna Marie to actually build a data-driven insights report, which will have more analytics in it. But for now, I think we have just 3 or 4 that we can quickly show you.
Yep. We'll do this very quickly, but tonight it's certainly about bragging about how Kitchener is really excelling, both internally and on the global stage. When we start to look very first at some of the data, we're starting to look at population density, and you can see this incredible, growth period from 2010 and beyond, which becomes really important as you're starting to think about the future of the city as well. Moving forward, we even now start to look at something that's particularly exciting, which is the growth of higher education degrees in the city. When you're looking at economic development, when you're looking at attracting business, when you're looking at retaining people here, these are the kind of indicators where the rubber really hits the road, and it becomes really important to look at. When you're talking about quality of life, this is a particularly interesting indicator. Across Canada, Kitchener has one of the highest percentages of outdoor recreation space per capita, meters squared, which is a really tremendous accomplishment when you're also talking about, how people are able to live and how livable your city is. Definitely a bragging point that I think that should be out there as well. Interestingly enough, another really great message that we're seeing here is around energy consumption in public buildings. You'll also notice a lot of these KPIs are tagged to the SDGs up top as well. But you are on a really incredible, as a city, trajectory of downward energy usage in your public buildings as well. Some might say, well, that was just because of COVID, but if you look at the graph, you'll notice it started even before COVID. So this is a really incredible trajectory and commitment. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Patricia, but also just to say thank you so much for your commitment to this, and we really look forward to working with you further. Thank you.
And finally, in closing, and the most important part of the night, is to say congratulations, Mayor Voronovich, City Council, and staff and colleagues here tonight. This leadership and commitment to this critical work are truly an example for cities across Canada and worldwide in our global network. It's my pleasure to now award the City of Kitchener with WCCD's ISO 37120 Platinum Certification for the reporting years 2020 and 2021. Congratulations, Mayor Voronovich, and congratulations to your dedicated team led by CAO Dan Chapman, and for the tremendous partnership of our colleague Anna Marie. The City of Kitchener has showcased a commitment to a data-driven future for its citizens and innovative leadership in local governance. So on behalf of the WCCD, I'd like to congratulate you and all of the city for your commitment to standardized and comparable city data. This standardized data, we believe, helps to increase the quality of life for citizens while driving evidence-based decision-making and data-driven solutions. The City of Kitchener stands out globally as a true leader in working to create a sustainable, a more inclusive and prosperous future for all your residents and for this great city. It's such a pleasure to be here in person with you. It's our first time after 3 certifications. Finally, we get to come in person, and it's just a pleasure to be here. So we have the frame certificates here, which we'd like to present to you, Mayor Voronovich, and I wish you all a very good evening, and thank you very much.
Congratulations. Thank you.
You get to hold the other pen. Here, Council here as well. You guys can join us. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you again.
There's some questions from council, so
Absolutely. Yeah, we can stick around for sure. Yeah. Nice to see you. Thank you.
There's a few other unframed ones here as well that we brought along, so we'll leave them with you.
Sorry?
A few extra certificates that we'll leave, they're unframed in an envelope here, we'll leave them with you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And Patricia and James, it's great to, as I said, have both of you here and get an update on the exciting work that you're doing with cities both in Canada and beyond, and to get this acknowledgement for the great work that Anna Marie and Dan and others on our city team have been doing in this space for the last number of years. I think we know that data is so important for good decision making, particularly that became evident during the pandemic, particularly in terms of health data and so on. And something that we want to continue to keep a focus on. And as I indicated to you when we met briefly before this meeting, the city's also been participating in a data program with the Bloomberg Philanthropies program that they have in place in terms of the city data initiative. We do have a couple some questions for you, and so I'll go to Councillor Johnson first.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor Barry. Thank you so much for being here tonight. From my first days of taking research methodology and statistics, I've really become a data geek over the years. So
aficionado.
it's really exciting, and what an honor to our city and frankly to our staff. Like it's really quite exciting. I'm wondering if you can maybe expand a little bit and comment on how this data is used to compare cities on a global stage, and maybe an idea of some of the cities that Kitchener is compared with would be interesting.
Yeah.
So we have this, we've been building it over the last several years to start to create the global benchmarking tool and visualize that. And what we were finding is that it's very important to have different peer groupings, because obviously Kitchener may not want to compare itself to Dubai, and Dubai may not want to compare itself to Buenos Aires or a small town in like Welland, Ontario. So we started to create what we're calling peer groups in the visualization of the data, so that you can actually sort yourself into population peer groups, for example. You can sort yourself into regional, geographic, so North America or just Canada, and Europe. A lot of the economic development officers are using it with Europe because of the competitive nature of attracting investment from some of the European countries. You can also sort yourself for global benchmarking into peer groups around climate type. And we learned this along the way because some cities were looking at air quality and seeing their PM 2.5 quite high relative even to WHO recommendations. So you can actually start to by climate type, because it's really important when you're living in a desert community, for example, the sand. We were with the mayor of Mecca at a meeting in Toronto City Hall, and he said, we have terrible PM 2.5. We're like one of the worst on the global graph. So why? And we said, it's the sand. So we started to take cities into peer groups by climate type. So there's geography, there's GDP per capita. So really wealthy nations and poorer nations can sort themselves into different peer groups as well. Some of the African cities are in one particular peer group. So there's different ways of global benchmarking, and it's really interesting for us to help customize some of those reports. If you're interested, in how are we doing on safety, or how's my city doing on air quality? How are we doing on energy and public buildings? You saw Cambridge is already really performing well on that, and it would be great to, show that relative to cities around the world.
Well, the work you do is really exciting. This is really an honor, again, for the city. I'm hoping that we'll be sharing this report with our local chambers, the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, and really get our story out about this. So thank you so much for being here.
Good, thank you very much. It's wonderful to have you in the Global Network.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanimic, and thank you for coming in again. And it's always great to have you two in here. You know, give us the kudos that I feel like we do deserve as a community. So, just out of curiosity, because if I recall correctly, last time you were before us was about 3 years ago.
I think it was on Zoom, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Was it on Zoom?
Yep, fall of 2020, I would say. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Just
On
on
a
the
scale,
coast.
like how many municipalities are in this program right now?
Right, we're at about 110 cities across 40 countries, and those are just the cities that have completed the certification. Our team back home is working with another additional 25 to 30 cities to get them into that. So it's growing. And what I would say that's really important is one of the most exciting demographics that is growing is the population range that Kitchener is in as well. You know, when we first started this, we thought it was going to be all of the Dubais and the Los Angeleses and the Londons, but it's actually, you know, medium-sized cities that are really using this data most effectively, I would say, because you're nimble. You know, you have a nimble administration that's ready to respond. You can take decisions and act quickly. So as that network grows, we'll definitely be sharing that with the mayor and with all of you, and to give you an indication of some of those emerging peers as well. And as we do some of that research with Anna Marie, some of that information will be unlocked as well. So it's growing quite significantly.
Okay. Yeah, because I think it's a really great achievement that we're able to achieve this standard certification, and it's really great what you guys are doing.
thank you.
Is there a way to go back to the slide with the park space? Because that one went by really quick. I would.
The recreation?
Yeah, outdoor recreation space. So I should be clear, it's not just parks. There's a whole methodology behind it. To go to the actual data source, we'd probably have to have a bit of a chat with Anna Marie and some of our team, but I think the slide should be coming up there. Yeah, exactly. So in a comparative context, Kitchener's right up there in the Canadian cities as well, which again, really exciting to see.
So this metric, how is it measured? You're saying it's measured just from Canadian side?
No, we have a full global measurement of this, and we could frame this data in many different ways. We just thought it might be interesting to see a Canadian perspective right now on some of this, but because of the nature of the standard, it is made so that Kitchener could be comparing itself to a similar sized city in Europe or, you know, any other part of the world as well.
Okay. So if we were looking at a global perspective, where we're ranking here, are we ranked pretty high?
You're still high regardless of where you're looking. I mean, offhand, I can tell you that you're about matched with Reykjavik in Iceland, which is really known for being one of the most outdoor forward, tourist-driven cities, which is a really exciting thing. So not only is this a high number in Canada, where Canadian cities typically perform quite well, but this is a high number globally. And when we build out this report a little bit further, that's some good feedback. We'll take that away and put some of those global comparators in there too.
And if you're interested, we can customize a couple of data sheets
I
with some
love
of
this
the...
data, to be honest. I really do,
you.
because what I've been hearing around this horseshoe in our community, we don't have enough green space. And we're doing this comparative throughout all these cities. It seems like we're doing a really good job.
Across
Not
Canada
saying-
and globally.
Not saying
Yeah.
that we can't do better, but I mean, it seems like we don't get that recognition that we're actually doing a really good job to begin with.
Yeah,
Anyway.
sometimes councillors have told us that sometimes it's instinct that we know we're doing well, but we don't have the data to prove it. And this is high caliber, ISO certified, trusted data saying this. So that's why we think the economic development side of this, how do you attract people? You say you have a good quality of life, but where are the numbers, right? And this helps you to make those arguments and build the case.
Well, anyways, thank you, and Mayor Verbanich, I just have a bit of a comment to say after the delegation, if that's
Okay, yep, I will, I'll come back to you if you want to cue in. James, just as a follow-up to Councillor Ioannidis' question and your comment, you indicated that this wasn't just park space, so I presume when we talk about outdoor recreation space, we're talking about everything from parks, trails, sports fields, ski hill, all that kind of thing.
You've got it. So
Okay.
at basketball courts, tennis courts, all of that stuff, facilities for citizens. We have an additional indicator on green space, which is a little bit different, but this is really active outdoor rec space.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report. I have a question about the certification process. You mentioned that you're working with some cities that are not yet certified, so what is that process? Is there a fee involved, or?
Do you want me?
Happy to take it. Yeah, so we're a not-for-profit based in Toronto, so we do charge an annual certification fee. It's quite nominal, but it keeps us moving. But the process itself is really hands-on with our staff. So our staff works directly with what we call a focal point in the city, which in this case is Anna Marie, who does this extraordinarily well. He or she will then liaise with different departments in the city to help collect the data. Where we also really kick in, and the data is very well organized, numerator, denominator, definition, methodology. We
All
also
reported into a portal.
all reported
All
online. We have some really robust, especially in Canada, relationships with other levels of government to help supply some of this data as well. Because Kitchener definitely has, I would say, a good 60% of this information in-house, as a lot of cities do, but it also might exist at the region. We know the province has it, Statistics Canada, et cetera. So in that initial process, we work with the city to gather everything. Once we've made sure that the WCCD has made sure that the data is in line with all of the definitions and methodologies, a firewall goes up, and we then submit this data to an independent third-party verifier contracted by us, held under significant confidentiality agreements, to do this final third-party check on the data. That individual then recommends a level of certification back to us, in this instance platinum, stating that the city has fulfilled all the requirements required to get it. They recommend the certification level to us. We accept it or reject it, if that is the case. Almost never happens. And then we offer certification to the city. So it's a pretty robust process.
Okay, thank you. My second question has to do with the Sustainable Development Goals that you referenced throughout the report. Are these standards that you set recognized by the UN?
Yes, increasingly. What happened was, most of the data for the SDGs, as you know, has been national governments reporting in through voluntary reviews. However, it was quite clear that cities are really where change is going to happen on the ground to achieve the SDGs by 2030. So we were invited to the UN headquarters in New York by the Secretary General's office to hold a session on data for cities for the SDGs. And in preparation for that, we mapped all of the 252 key performance indicators across the 3 standards to all of the 17 SDGs. And then we published a very thick, robust book. I think it's on the mayor's coffee table. And we have a new version actually coming out now. And at that point, it became this idea of localizing the SDGs, and that discussion started to happen. I saw the mayor at several of them in New York in preparation for this. So it's been a bit of a wonderful track that we've been on. And increasingly, cities are starting to think about voluntary local reviews. So as you may know, LA and New York have gone to UN headquarters at the high-level political forum in New York every June or July. And they present a voluntary local review. And there's only a few cities that are doing this. It's mostly national governments presenting theirs. So we're encouraging our member cities with this data mapping to go, and we have a template prepared for the VLR for any city that would like to do this. We can plug the data into the template for all the 17 goals, and the mayor can present it at the high-level political forum.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Chapman, just on that, actually, UCLG, which is the global organization of essentially the equivalent of FCM, is just in the process of doing some training sessions on voluntary local reviews. And I shared that information with staff, because this September there will actually be a summit on the SDGs in New York with heads of government, and I know part of what Canada is focusing on is not only their voluntary national review, but also cities that are doing some of the work that we're doing and highlighting them. We've been highlighted once in the past in terms of our digital Kitchener strategy as part of the federal government's voluntary national review. Councillor Singh. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to you both for presenting. And this is absolutely a proud moment for, I think, all of us, for the great work that our staff have been doing and past council decisions. In many cases, we strive to aim for the moon, and this is a realization that we've already landed on the moon and planted the flag. And I guess we got to start, putting our goals even higher. One of the things I had more of clarification. It's great that we have this data and the organization, gathers together and be able to kind of, ranking a performance on key metrics. Do you guys analyze that data as well to kind of ascertain why do some do better and why are others struggling as in some of these performance metrics?
So the WCCD is really here to build the data, and we really don't want to rank cities. We found that there's so much trust in this relationship we have in just the reporting and then the certification, our internal reviews, and then this third-party verifier, et cetera. To then, for us to step out and say, here's a city and here's a city that's doing better in these rankings. What we're offering to cities, though, is really quite sage advice on how to answer some of these rankings. Because I don't know if you've seen some of these rankings most recently coming out. Every time they come out, you look at and ask, well, where's the data on these rankings and how sound is this data? What is the methodology they're using to say this is a safe city? What is the emergency response time? How is it being measured? Is emergency response time is 7 minutes in Boston and 5 minutes in Kitchener? What is the difference? Sometimes it's because it's a different methodology.
Okay.
The cities are measuring it from the time of the 911 emergency call of the citizen. Other cities are measuring from the time of the dispatch of the emergency vehicle. So it shaves off 3 minutes, but they're being ranked with those pretty bad methodologies, if I might say so. Don't get me started. But this data equips cities to answer those, to say, right? This is flawed. Actually, Kitchener is here, right? So it really is quite empowering. Data can be
so I'm
very-
hoping this data will allow us to ask further questions too. Something that I think Councillor Ioannidis kind of picked up on as well as we have these internal conversations. And the other is the slide that really popped up to mind and for clarification regarding, the number of university or college educated individuals. And we're very fortunate that we have, I really would say world-class or Canada leading college and 2 universities and the third one very nearby.
Yep.
Is that a contributing factor, or are other communities that are ranking high in that data set but don't necessarily have that asset? I'm just trying to figure, is it because of the institutions that we have, or it's more of the attraction that we have as a community for talent and capacity of retention as well?
Well, to speak to the first point about, yes, certainly 2 world-class institutions in the city, but the indicator actually mostly isn't capturing that. It's capturing residents in the city. So what I think is even more exciting is that you're retaining or welcoming highly educated people. What we see around the world, we see this actually writ large in some smaller communities in the Netherlands that we work with. People leave those communities and don't come back. They go to Amsterdam, they go to Rotterdam, et cetera, et cetera. But the really exciting thing here is that maybe some of those students certainly are staying, but you've got people going further afield, maybe to Toronto, maybe across Canada, maybe globally, but they're coming back and making Kitchener home. So that's a really important distinction to make about the indicator. Certainly contributing, having those world-class institutions here, but it's about your residents, which I think makes the data point even more exciting to a certain extent.
That's great. Thank you again.
Councillor Clancy.
Thank you guys so much. It's very comprehensive, and it's nice for us to kind of tease apart over dinner and look at how we're doing in different areas, and I appreciate you coming here to present that. And thank you, Anna Marie and our staff. I can imagine that collecting and using this amount of data is quite enormous. Just curious how, maybe this is more a question for staff, but how, now that we're platinum, how do we maintain and make sure that our staff are supported in this great work, but also enrich it and help weave it through all that we do, just to ensure council can support staff.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it goes without saying that, I mean, the staff have done incredible work. We're at a really interesting pivot point here, because this data becomes more powerful every year that it's being collected. So we're at this 3-year point where staff has really developed a really robust way to request the data. We're helping them to work through that and make it even more efficient, maybe even becoming a bit more hands-on with our staff, to actually help everyone in this room and everyone in the city focus on a new aspect of this work, and that is actually putting the data to use. Collecting data is one thing, your staff does an incredible job with it, but we have a meeting with Anna Marie tomorrow to start talking about, okay, 3 years of data, how can this start to align to your new strategic plans? How can this align even more closely with your SDG work, with your ECDEV work, et cetera, et cetera? So this is really a nice turning point as we move into 3, 4, 5 years of data, because a lot of those trends start to emerge, and we can really put it to use, as opposed to the year 1, year 2 focus on getting the systems right to collect it. We're now at that inflection point that I think is going to be really exciting, and knowing again the caliber of your staff, I think there's some really exciting things that we're hoping to support moving forward as well.
And we're also having conversations with other levels of government to help to alleviate some of the pain points. So we have an MOU now signed with Statistics Canada, so we have automatic download of a number of data points to help unburden the cities. We have partnerships with CIHI for all the health data now, which is fantastic data. We've signed agreements with them. We work with the provincial ministries and also the region of Kitchener-Waterloo, who holds some of the data. So we're helping to claw in advance, so we get the workbooks open that is already pre-populated with some of this data. That's one way we're helping to alleviate some of the HR requirements inside City Hall. And the other part is something that's happened just recently over the course of COVID, because so many city halls emptied. It was harder to report the data and keep the data continuity year-over-year trend happening. So we started to develop something we call enhanced support, where our team does a little more of the heavy lifting with the data to alleviate some of the staff, so that, as James said, staff can actually work on the interesting part and putting the data to use. So we're working on an enhanced support model, and we're signing partnerships with data custodians, including some of the hard ones that like utilities, for example, outside of City Hall. We have partnerships signed with some of the utility providers to get this data. We're working with GIS training to get some of the green space and others. So we're helping cities to, make it a little faster and smoother over the years. We've learned how to do that.
Thank you. I know Chair Redmond said you measure what you value and you change what you measure. So I think you're encouraging us all to measure our values and then make those changes accordingly.
That's exciting. We're starting year 4 tomorrow morning, so get ready. Year 4, 5, and 6, the next 3 years, by the way, statistically at the 5-year point, it's kind of magical because you can actually then do predictive analytics. So you already have 3 and you're getting to that really pivotal moment. So we're off and running tomorrow on year 4. So
that will help us
it's such a
lot.
pleasure working with this
Thank
group.
you.
So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think, Anna Marie, you wanted to add something?
Please.
Through you, Mayor Chair, to Councillor Clancy. So you can see that we have committed to year 4, and we will be beginning that work, that undertaking. And so it involves several people across the organization to mine the data and the systems that we collect the data in. So it's important in your scope of influence that you ensure you maintain the staff capacity and build the staff capacity in order to do the skillful mining within the organization and the community partners they've identified to be able to provide you with the data that's necessary to make the data-informed decisions. That is within your scope of influence, and it's really important because, as they identified, it's the now what. So we have 3 years, but it takes skillful staff-level analysis, right, in partnership with WCCD to be able to offer you what is really and truly needed to make data-informed decisions. And so I just really want to underscore that for you, that this has been a 3-year pilot. We are moving on to the 4th year, and we need your commitment and support to build that capacity at the staff level to do the good work, to put you in a good position to move forward. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks, Anna Marie. And I guess I should kind of welcome you, because I think this is the first time we're actually seeing each other in person. Up till now, it's just been virtual since you started. So it's great to have you here and join us. So those are all the questions we had. Thank you again to both of you. I know you're meeting with Anna Marie tomorrow, and wish you continued success in this work, and we look forward to continuing this collaboration with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's a pleasure
Thank you,
working with
everyone.
you all. Thank you,
Yeah.
and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Before I move on, I'm going to just move back to one item, and that's, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, Councillor Ioannidis, you want to make a comment. My apologies.
It's a bit of a question for staff. I know over the years we've been collecting these amazing achievements with many of our, great services that we provide in our community. And just the other day, I was at my son's basketball game, and I was at Cameron Heights, and I was looking at all their banners of all the things. Do we ever think of the idea of maybe putting a way to display all of our achievements somewhere so the public can see these? That's all.
So let staff comment. I do know that some are on display in the cabinet by the elevator downstairs, and so on, and then others are on the floors. I think we can have little banners like we do at the Odd about all the wins. I'll let staff take that away and see what kind of creative idea they can come up with. But no, you're right. I mean, even something as simple as even putting something on our webpage that actually highlights all of these recognitions that we get, because we have been fortunate because of the great work that our staff and community groups do. So that'll always be helpful. Maybe that's something that, I don't know, Compass Kitchener can think about and advise on. And so were there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There not being any, we will now move on to delegations, speaking of Compass Kitchener. And I do want to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting, interrupting councillor, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about mayor, council, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, or any hate speech or defamatory comments. For those delegations participating electronically, you'll be made a panelist prior to your name being called. Once you've joined the meeting as a panelist, you'll have access to your microphone and camera. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. And with that, I will go to the strategic plan in Compass Kitchener. Do you want to kick things off?
Thank you. As we prepare for the next strategic plan, Compass Kitchener and the community have been providing input over the past year throughout 2022. There's no direction being sought from City Council today, but Compass Kitchener is here to share community priorities as one of a number of key inputs into our strategic planning process. Staff have been working on their contributions as well. Our resident panel is currently meeting and putting their ideas together as well. At a council strategic session in February, we will engage you on your priorities as well for your term and to help shape and guide the strategic plan with the various inputs provided as context. So this isn't the last time we'll have this conversation, but it's an important evening to talk about Compass Kitchener's community priorities as a summary of all the great work that they've done in leadership in engaging the community over the last year. And I would like to introduce the chair and vice chair of Compass Kitchener, Ms. Stevens-Wells and Mr. Glover.
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Verbanovich and members of council and ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. And first, may I say congratulations on your WCCD Platinum status certification. That's really impressive. Troy and I are really pleased to be here to report on behalf of Compass Kitchener. For new councillors, I just wanted to mention that Compass Kitchener is a council-appointed advisory committee comprised of engaged local citizens charged with a range of responsibilities, all of which relate to the strategic plan. So we provide input into the statistically significant survey that Environics conducted on the city's behalf. We work with staff to develop and help host the public engagement process and related activities. We base our analysis of on the responses gathered through the survey and public engagement process to provide a report to council on what we deem to be the community priorities, and that's the report we're bringing to you this evening. Once the strategic plan is approved and in place and implementation begins, we provide periodic reports to council reporting on our evaluation of progress in terms of implementation of that plan and reaching the goals that have been set out in the strategic plan. The public engagement process was designed to further explore the responses that were received in the Environics survey as we seek to better understand the challenges being faced in our community and citizens' aspirations for the city's future. Both Council and Compass Kitchener identified issues following review of those survey results that they wanted to have explored further through public engagement. We then consulted with representatives of all the city's advisory committees through an all-advisory committee meeting that we held last spring to gather their input into how to successfully carry out that public engagement process. The public engagement activities took place between July and September. They included in-person input that people provided through 4 consultations held in community centers across the city, interviews that were conducted by our new street team members who visited various sites where people tend to gather in the city. And that was a fabulous addition because it really allowed us to reach a more diverse audience and capture comments that people would not have taken the time necessarily to provide through other vehicles. As well, online input to the community engagement process was provided through Engage Kitchener, and there were a number of ideas boards posted there around the themes that had emerged from the survey, and through that we could gather input on a number of key issues. For example, we had over 4,000 visits to Engage Kitchener to the online page. We had 617 ideas that were shared through the neighborhood focus groups. We had 541 ideas on the ideas board contributed by community members. And we had over 100 interviews that were done by the New Street team. And we had 35 artistic contributions to the city's future vision, looking 20 years down the road. We were really pleased with the number of citizens who engaged in the process, and also the fact that we were hearing from a more diverse range of residents in the community than we have in the past. Having reviewed the feedback received through both the survey and the public engagement process, we then proceeded to identify what we thought were the key overarching principles or priorities that needed to be addressed in the new strategic plan. We then took our draft summary to another meeting of the All Advisory Committee with representatives of all the city's advisory committees to gather their feedback. And so it's all of that information that has really informed our report to you this evening. Our analysis of the survey and the engagement responses led to identification of 2 overarching principles and 8 key priorities. And so I'd now like to turn things over to Troy to begin as we walk you through those.
Thank you, Judy. It's important to note, first of all, as Judy mentioned, that across all of these priorities, we need to appreciate the importance of equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. And so with that in mind, the priority really envisions Kitchener as a place where equity, diversity, and inclusion is woven into everything we do. It is the heart of our planning and a core principle of all our projects.
The other overriding or overarching principle that we wanted to highlight was the efforts to refine the effectiveness of collaborative relationships. It has become really clear to us that the issues that are most important to residents in many cases cross multiple jurisdictions, and they require collaboration and alignment of multiple levels of government and other stakeholders who are our partners if we want to achieve meaningful results. Our observation is that all of this important city building work is really enhanced and accelerated when all levels of government, community organizations, and residents are working together towards a shared vision and with a coordinated timeline. As a result, we really stress the importance of bringing stakeholders together and making concerted efforts to enhance the effectiveness of working relationships and collaborative plans.
Through its engagement process, the city, Compass Kitchener has identified housing affordability as a priority for the city. This priority envisions Kitchener as a community where everyone has a comfortable and affordable place to call home. It includes diversifying housing options at a variety of price points, developing tools that balance the needs of the city, residents, and developers, using creative design to meet the changing needs of residents, including through adaptive reuse, multiple or multi-family units, tiny homes, among other possibilities, and enabling aging in place so that our city is accessible to the physical needs of older adults. Belonging was also identified as another important priority. This priority envisions Kitchener as a place where everyone feels a sense of belonging within vibrant and connected communities. It includes being proactive about advancing a healthy community, providing free community spaces for cultural communities, offering free or affordable community recreation and leisure programs, and enabling accessible arts and cultural activities.
In a similar vein, it's important that Kitchener is a place where everyone is valued and our diversity is celebrated. That Kitchener is a city in which equity, diversity, and inclusion are prioritized in all our work, where we actively work toward reconciliation, where our goal is accessibility for all, and where we constantly strive to reduce stigma of any kind, for example, stigma with respect to mental health or financial need. And in a related vein, it's also very important to carry on continuous efforts to ensure that Kitchener is a place where newcomers feel welcome and thrive, where the settlement process is smooth, it's easy to connect with services, ensuring that basic needs are met and that it's easy to learn to navigate our systems, where in-person service and alternate languages are promoted, and where newcomers can connect with their communities through arts, culture, and recreation activities and programs.
Environmental sustainability represents another important priority. This priority envisions Kitchener as a place where the environment is protected and enhanced. It includes planting more trees, expanding green space offerings, and maintaining old growth trees. Encouraging more natural gardens and fruit trees as one way to address food security. Ensuring access to clean water for future generations. Improving infrastructure to adapt to the changing environment. Reducing carbon emissions through climate actions and mitigation. And helping the community learn about and implement healthy environmental initiatives on residential and business properties. Urban growth stood out as another priority. This priority envisions Kitchener as a place where growth is thoughtfully planned, innovative, and sustainable. It includes growing with a vibrant community in mind. In other words, growing community, not just buildings and roads. Continuing to add amenities to support our growing population, including keeping accessibility in mind. working with developers to ensure residential building options are not limited to high-rises, supporting businesses and retaining talent through economic development, and building infrastructure and preparing for emergencies, such as proactively mitigating the potential for damage during major weather events.
How people are able to move around the city is another key priority. And in that regard, it's of real importance that Kitchener is a place where walking, cycling, and public transportation are convenient, safe, and accessible in every neighborhood, where trails and cycling connections continue to be expanded throughout the city and keep up with growth, where we continue to increase the number of kilometers of trails and cycling paths on which there's winter maintenance, making them safer and more navigable for both transportation and recreational use, where there's affordable, efficient public transportation, which is well connected with new and suburban neighborhoods as well as with other cities, where there is less reliance on cars for transportation, and where we strive to create more 15-minute neighborhoods, those with good walkability, proximity to places of work, shopping, and other amenities. And finally, but certainly of very key importance, is ongoing and effective public engagement, which is a really key component of healthy life in our community. We really want Kitchener to be a place where residents are engaged, feel heard, and contribute meaningfully to decision-making, where we better promote the city's public engagement campaigns and opportunities using new approaches, plain language, and public education, where we always close the loop reporting back on engagement results and how input received made a difference to decisions that were being made, where engagement activities are integrated into locations where people gather naturally, where we focus on youth engagement, incorporating communication channels typically used by youth. The youth are our future, and it's really key that we engage them as youth so that that carries through into later life. Where we have a clear strategy for reaching out to and building relationships with equity-seeking groups. And that brings us to the end of our official report. We really thank you for having the confidence to entrust Compass Kitchener with the role of presenting you with its assessment of community priorities based on survey results and perspectives gathered through public engagement. We know not all cities are game to do that, and we think it takes real courage and confidence for the city to do that, and we're delighted to take on that role. We look forward to your response, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Judy and Troy. And maybe let me begin by saying thank you for having the courage to become chair of Compass Kitchener once again, and Troy the courage to offer as vice chair. And you know, Judy, you've heard me say this before. Troy, your first time, but one of the strengths of I think of our community is Compass Kitchener and the role that it plays, both in terms of helping build a strategic plan, monitoring that strategic plan on behalf of council and staff, and also letting us know how we're doing as part of that monitoring process. And I know, you know, I would certainly say on behalf of council, please, as you encounter people from the former committee that you were on, Judith, or this one, that we certainly appreciate all the work that's being done, not only by yourselves, but also Angie Fritz-Walters and Catherine Dever and others on staff who have been leading the strategic planning process, so thank you for that. We do have several members of council with questions, so I will start off with Councillor Johnson, and I do just want to acknowledge we do have one other delegation on this issue afterwards. And so actually, you know what, I may just ask the two of you to sit down for 2 minutes,
Sure.
if you might, or for 5 minutes,
Sure.
And we'll hear from that delegation so we can factor that into any questions that people might be asking.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And so I would invite up Brooklyn Wallace, please. Welcome, Brooklyn.
Hello. Just one moment. Hello, everyone. Through the mayor, hello to staff and council. My name's Brooklyn Wallace. Since I last delegated, I've been chosen as chair for the Climate Change and Environmental Advisory Committee here at the city. I'm very happy to have the role, and I'm very excited to use the position to continue to advocate for our city. But to be clear, I'm not actually delegating on behalf of the CCEAC today. Today I'd like to talk about the strategic plan. I'm excited to see our strategic plan in the place that it is today. These 8 community priorities are exactly what I campaigned on. It was essentially just what was my postcard during the campaign. I'm excited to see the desire to affect all of those things being put down into our new plan. I want to reiterate the fact that all 8 of these community priorities are intrinsically linked. Housing affordability needs construction, and to remain sustainable means that we need to build up and not out. Denser communities are better for biking and change how we move, and smaller, more walkable communities are closer to each other with a greater sense of belonging, which then leads to more community participation. I can't stress this enough. Ignoring one of these aspects of this plan means throwing out the whole thing. To focus in on one point, changing how we move around the city means changing the city. I'll remind you that all around the world, the fastest way to get somewhere is how people choose to go there. I've been biking around the city all winter. I don't own a car, and the bus system is slower than biking, and honestly, I get motion sick. The weather isn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. Your body heats up fairly quickly, and before you know it, you're warm and toasty, given that you're wearing the proper equipment. I thought I'd need to buy much more than I actually needed to. I haven't actually purchased anything specifically for winter biking. My gloves, scarves, winter coat, and boots have all been enough. There are upgrades to be had, but my gear has been enough for my use. But no, the cold hasn't been an issue for me and my bike. What has been an issue is infrastructure. Now that I know what to look for, I see hazards for cyclists daily. The snow drifts left by plows around every point where the sidewalk hits the road can mean spinning out of control. Painted bike lanes all around the city are often at least 60% covered by slush. I've seen people call them bicycle gutters for a reason. Even protected bike lanes aren't safe. The other day, I was biking on the separated lane on Joseph with my dog in my back, on my back, and the snow from the cars lane had been plowed, pushed onto the median and past the median onto the bike lane, making the 2-lane bike lane into a 1-lane thing. These issues are infrastructure problems that need to be fixed in order to actually change the way that we move. With that in mind, I'd like to invite everyone here and anyone watching at home to a community-led winter walk and bike ride on Sunday, February the 5th. Starting at 1 p.m., meeting at Center in the Square. We'll start with a discussion on winter cycling, with Red Raccoon Bike Rescue providing free bike repairs and maintenance. Then at 2, we'll start the ride and walk. I really think that all council should attend. Considering our strategic plan's priorities, I believe this will be an excellent way for those of you who are winter bike curious to learn how to do it, and an even better way for those of you who don't bike at all or would never bike in the winter to engage with the biking community and learn from their perspective about what needs to change. Thank you all for your time, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much. I have people in the queue from before for for the Compass Kitchener delegation. Is anybody have a question for Brooklyn, just so that I, Councillor Ioannidis? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thanks, Brooklyn, for coming in. When you say you go biking, where do you primarily bike?
Mostly between, honestly, here and my house.
Okay.
I like I was saying earlier, I biked my dog in my back seat of my bike over to the vet and back because there was an emergency last week.
Okay. Because
she's okay. Don't worry.
It's interesting because I was at an event this weekend and I heard quite the opposite. In fact, I even witnessed it on Sunday, where I find the bike lanes are cleared before the streets. And as I was going to my son's basketball game, I saw the same thing happen again. So I've quite seen the opposite. So that's why I'm curious to know where are these spots that you're saying that aren't being cleared? Because
I think part of it
differently.
Yes, I think part of the issue is. For instance, on Joseph Street, we have the separated two-way bike path there, and then a one-way road. If the bike lane is plowed first, and then the second, the one-way street plowed second, if the plow isn't being careful and pushing it onto the very thin median in between the bike lane and the roadway, it will just push it over, push it onto the bike lane, which is what had happened to me the other day. I find that the bicycle gutter type bike lanes are the biggest issue in the city. The individual bike lanes that are protected definitely tends to be a lot better, partially just because it uses different equipment than the bike or than the roadways. So of course they don't need to prioritize as much because there is just less to plow.
Okay, yeah, because I can only assume with our bike paths that they're somewhat similar to the roads and they're cleared through based on priorities and everything else. So maybe that's what you're seeing, but from where I'm seeing the major bike lanes that I see them cleared, and I get quite a few.
I think a major issue, or one of the things that I'm talking about is at the end of the bike lane, when the plows come and push snow over, and even though the lane itself is mostly clear, there's a hill of sludge, of sleet and whatever right there, which is actually really dangerous. If you are on your bike and you hit that, obviously your front wheel hits it before your back wheel, and suddenly your front wheel and your back wheel are going at different speeds. And on a car, that's less of an issue because there are four wheels, it's much more stable. On a bike, that just throws you over. You fall over very quickly. So it's those big piles of sludge that are the biggest issue for me.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. And I don't, sorry, Councillor Janot.
Thank you. Thanks, Brooklyn, for your presentation. I'm just curious, what's a bicycle gutter?
So when I say bicycle gutter, I'm talking about the painted bike lanes on the side of some streets that have a little bike icon in it and the white line. And a lot of the time, the plow comes over, only hits maybe half of that lane, pushes all the snow to the other side of the lane, which then slowly falls back and takes back over. Okay. I've seen many images over the last few days, especially with all of the snow last week, of bike lanes that were pretty much totally covered by that bicycle gutters that are basically totally covered. The protected bike lanes tend to be much better. The alongside bike lanes tend to be just big gutters for the road.
Protected bike lanes are the ones with
The separated by
yeah.
grade or by a median or something like that.
okay. Yeah, obviously snow and accessibility is a huge issue, especially around, in winter time. And so I can definitely understand, the concern. As a former runner, I knew what it was like, running in the snow. And, there's, snow plowing is not perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your presentation, Brooklyn.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Brooklyn? No, in Brooklyn, the bike ride that you mentioned, is that the weekly bike ride that Ground Up Waterloo Region
It is.
does? Okay. So if people can't attend this week, they can go another week?
Yes, this week we are doing a slightly larger event with the walk and talk with Red Raccoon being there. And then after the walk, we planned on hanging out at Cafe Pyrus. Hopefully I can attend. I have friends moving. They just recently bought a new house. And their move-in day is that day, so I might not be there for all of it. But I hope that some of you will be able to attend for that, for the larger event. But like you said, if you miss it, we have weekly bike rides still, even through the winter.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. And so now we'll invite Judy and Troy back up because we've got 6 people in the queue. So with that, Councillor Johnson, you're first up.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Judy and Troy. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for volunteering to be on this committee. It's a great night. Like I said, we've been sharing lots of stats and lots of data, and that's really incredible. And Brooklyn touched on this as well. I think that the community priorities that have been shown to be priorities are what we heard on the doorsteps as well. And so it really matches up well with, I think, where we know where we need to go in our community over the next little while. And I really appreciate that when we're looking at this, at priorities, we're doing it through an EDIA lens. That's really, really important. So thank you for keeping a focus on that. My question is, I was really, really pleased to see the new team interviews, that you're out interviewing 100 people. We often hear from many of the same people on many of the same issues. And the fact that you're going out and asking questions of people who we may not always get opinions from is really, really important. Is there a plan to do that ongoing, or to expand it? Maybe we can talk about that.
I don't know that that's been discussed to this date. Certainly there's huge interest in ongoing public engagement, and I think Angie introduced the street team this year to the process, and I think that was fabulous. And you'll see comments reflected in our written report that Angie and Catherine submitted to you in advance. Those quotes start to give you a bit of a feel on a personal level of where those comments are coming from, and I think it really delivers the information in a very impactful way. It also meant that some people who would not necessarily choose to come out to an event per se in which we're seeking public engagement, they had an opportunity to respond to some key questions. Some of them were people who said, if you'd phoned me, I would have hung up. Mm-hmm. But I am interested in commenting on a couple of things. So we as a committee, I'm sure, will be really interested in encouraging further use of that kind of a communication that also happens where people tend to gather, whether it's in parks or in shopping areas or at festivals that are being carried out across the city. It's a great way to meet people where they are accustomed to being.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm hoping that we'll be able to think of some new ways of trying to get voices that we haven't heard from before. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you this year.
Okay. And we also had a diverse trio of street interviewers, and I think that was really helpful, so that there were different means of approach through different avenues.
Okay, great. Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Next up is Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and some of my colleagues' comments. Compass Kitchener, what's asked of the citizen volunteers is a tremendous amount of contribution. So thank you to the both of you, what you guys put in. And more importantly, Compass Kitchener, I think, is a committee that attempts to hold this council honest, and we appreciate that. I think it's very much important. We come in with, in some cases, our own internal biases on what is a priority or a personal interest, right? And sometimes even recommendations from staff tend to be led through some personal interest, as well as, of course, try to reach out the wider community. But what you guys talk to, everyday citizens is truly reflective of what's required right now. And what was really impactful, it's more of a comment, but you can add on a little bit further, for me was seeing the collaboration, which is really important, that our citizens realize that's incumbent on us to reach out to the other orders of government, of course, and our peer communities here in the region. And the other is, and this is where I would love to have some more feedback as well, is the conversation around affordable housing, and it's very important, and there's tremendous need, but tends to revolve explicitly on shelter or more importantly, the most deep affordable housing options. But your report here also addresses a wide diversity of a housing stock, specifically, age-friendly, where people can age within a certain neighborhood. Do you want to add more to that of, the desire to build a community that addresses housing across the spectrum?
I think that's really key. Certainly, in the last strategic plan, we encouraged council to adopt a plan that undertook looking at the affordability of housing issue. And the working group that worked on that did a great job of recognizing that there's a broad spectrum of housing challenges that we face, from affordable and supportive housing, affordable rental housing, affordable housing that can be purchased and owned individually. They looked at the fact that people are living in different configurations, and we need larger units for larger families, that there was a perception that too many units are kind of one bedroom or bachelor units that cannot accommodate a family or an extended family. So it's a whole spectrum. It's not one segment alone. The homelessness piece is clearly a key part of that, and finding the appropriate supports. We know that it's not a primary city responsibility, but there's a lot the city can and has been doing and can continue to do to contribute to the solution of the problem.
I think I said it earlier, when I said you guys hold us honest, right? And that's the thing, you're reminding us not to forget everyone else. Homelessness is absolutely important, but making sure that our policies address housing across. The other is my last question about the 15-minute neighborhoods. It's great that it's here. And how important in those conversations that you have in public consultation feedback were trails that play into that livable, smaller neighborhood community where a person has access to the most amenities that they would need within that 15-minute radius, and the trails that they, what they provide for that walkability. Thank you.
Lots of people responded in a way that didn't necessarily articulate 15-minute communities per se, using that particular label. But certainly a lot of the feedback touched on the challenges people face getting from home to work, looking at the modes of transportation that they can utilize to do that, and do that in an environmentally friendly way. So I think we heard about it through a number of different avenues, not always labeled as 15-minute communities, but people are looking at how you move around the city, how you reduce your environmental footprint by, in fact, being able to conduct life in a more walkable public transit kind of way, and that means essentially more 15-minute communities.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you again for this amazing work. It's always great to find out what the priorities are, to see council and staff work on them and get the report card to see how we've done. The public engagement is something that's really dear to my heart, and it's great to see these recommendations. And sometimes we hear when we do engagement that, well, you asked for my opinion, you didn't use it, so I wasn't heard. Is there a way like that we can communicate, like you were heard, but so were other opinions, and from all that, a direction was formed?
Yeah, clearly that closing, what we refer to as closing the loop piece, is absolutely critical. And we sense from our feedback from the community generally throughout the last number of years, as well as through the consultation process, that there are frustrations, that there are factions that feel they've contributed and it just vaporized whatever they said. And so I think the more the city can do in its reports and convey to the public about what it has heard in the breadth of consultation that it's carried out. Clearly not everyone is going to be happy, not everyone's needs are going to be met. But I think it's really important to talk about what we heard and how that led us into the decision that we're now at. That I think people need to see that trail that tells them, yes, you heard me, but here were the prevailing elements that led to a decision. I think that is so key. Part of the closing the loop, I think, also gets accomplished through public education. That in some cases, people don't truly understand the areas that the city actually has room to respond to what they're requesting. So in some cases, people are asking for things that are perhaps totally impossible for the city to do. And we need to promote the education that helps them understand that. But we also need to let them know that they were heard and what difference did that make. And we found that even as Compass Kitchener, through I'm now in my 7th year on the committee, through the early years there was far less sense that what we did, what was its impact? We delivered a report, it was always appreciatively received, and then in earlier days we didn't hear a lot back about so what happened? How does that make a difference? It makes a huge difference to hear where that resonates, where it differs from what you're hearing from other sources. That feedback loop is really important.
Great, thanks. And I'd be really interested too in finding out more. I mean, tonight's probably not the time for it, but you know, the different channels and the different kind of language we use if we want to communicate to a senior or a younger person. The channels, the language, everything I think is really important. So thanks again for all the hard work. This is great.
Troy, did you want to add something as well?
I was just going to say that I think the city really ought to underscore with the public the value of pluralism. And I think that encouraging I was going to say students, I'm a professor, sorry. When you're engaging with citizens, I think it's actually helpful to encourage them to get involved in the engagement process. I was part of a meeting last week, which was a resident panel, and I was very impressed with the dialogue in that panel. There were very diverse perspectives, and because of the dialogue in which they engaged, you could see people coming together, disagreeing perhaps, but starting to empathize with other people who had different perspectives. And it certainly was a much more civil engagement than I suspect during the pandemic when we're all isolated on our own. So underscoring that value of pluralism and encouraging people to participate in entering that dialogue, I think is really important.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. And thank you. It's nice to see this coming back. I also wanted to comment on the feeling heard point. I know in the last report, that was one of the places that we scored quite low. So I'm glad to see it's back. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see if what the results are this time around. I also had an observation, maybe a question related to the embryonic study the Engage Kitchener, the Compass Kitchener findings, they're slightly different. Was it because of the survey questions, or was it more open-ended in yours versus Environics, or why? How can you explain the difference between the results?
That's an interesting question. I suspect part of it is that there are different questions. We had very specific questions for the telephone survey that Environics used. The ideas boards that were posted on the Engage Kitchener site really looked at aggregated information in a number of areas. So the questions, I would say, were broader and a little more open-ended. Angie might want to comment on that as well. But I would say part of it is a refocusing. The results of the survey were taken and then looked at in terms of common threads and sort of collective images that emerged, and those then led to the idea boards that were developed for people to respond on.
Sorry, go ahead, Angie. I was going, Ms. McDonald's not here, I'm confused. Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Mayor, through you. The Environics survey identified some of the key themes that Council and Compass Kitchener then identified what they wanted to dig deeper into and learn more about. And so the follow-up questions were really based on those themes and building a deeper understanding for what people meant when they identified those things. As an example, when housing came out as a key theme, housing affordability came out as a key theme, the follow-up questions were, how does housing affect you in your day-to-day life? In 20 years, if we were to address housing affordability well, what would the result be and what would that look like? So really providing that deeper understanding of where residents were coming from in those Environics surveys responses that were at a higher level.
Right.
And we were able to really understand in a deeper way how those issues affect residents.
Okay, and I mean, I like the bigger list anyway, but I just noticed that difference. My last question has to do with when you look at each of the subdivisions within these items, these 8 items, I mean, it's quite the list, right? How do you weight how are the different variables going to be weighted? Like, do you come up with I don't know, how are you going to weight them?
We did not go through an exercise of rating or ranking them relative to one another. I think that's going to be one of the strengths of the resident panel, which is being introduced as a whole new element of public engagement in the strategic plan development process. And as Troy was suggesting, it's a 4-meeting cycle of meetings where people will have the opportunity to respond to, for instance, at the most recent meeting, we had looked at a list of 20 real possible goals being the focal point for the strategic plan. Staff and CLT had gone through an exercise of narrowing that down to a much shorter list of 6. The resident panel had an opportunity to look at that, look at the implications of that kind of shortening of the list, the kind of emphasis that would bring to the plan, to respond to that, and then provide a consensus of feedback as to whether that looked like the right thing to have done or not, and were there tweaks that were needed, what would those tweaks be? So Compass on its own has not looked at those priorities, setting those priorities or ranking those priorities relative to one another. Right. But I think the resident panel will be of assistance in that process.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite often cities and elected officials were, positioned in a way where we're accused of not listening, we're accused of ignoring what the concerns of the community are. And with a report like this, and I think it's a fabulous report, I think it shows that we are listening, that the city is listening. And as you mentioned, Judy, opinions may differ depending on the group, but information like this is so critical to, making the city as best as it can be, attracting employers, attracting the best employees. And so thank you very much for this work. It's really, really good. Just a quick question. So when you're trying to bring all the partners on board, all the different groups and stuff like that, do you have any challenges to bringing, whether it's the provincial government, federal government, not-for-profit agencies, do you have difficulty kind of getting everybody on board?
Well, it's interesting. Your question makes me think of a response that came through quite clearly at the resident panel recently. And that was a really strong interest that people voiced in seeing collaborations of community members, organizational representatives, key stakeholders within each sphere of whatever strategic plan is developed, so that for each goal that they would love to see a community collaboration that would involve the city and its partners in an ongoing dialogue through a 4-year term, looking at what's happening with respect to that goal area, what new things are emerging within the community environment that are informing everyone's behavior one way or another. So I think that's a strategy that came forward from the broader 40-member resident panel as a way of tackling it. I think another piece of the puzzle in terms of effective engagement is making sure that there is always readily available information on the city's website in terms of its policies and plans, because in some areas where people don't really have access to that information, it's difficult to set expectations of what they could actually achieve. So I think the city's come a long way in recent years in that respect. I think we can keep working on that so that a citizen interested in a particular sphere of work that the city is undertaking can get a good grasp of what its policies are, what its framework is for guiding its own decisions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much, and keep up the good work. Really good. Thank you.
And unless somebody else cues in, Councillor Ioannidis is the last person.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. Thank you for coming in, for everything that Compass Kitchener does. In fact, it's probably the only time I really was excited when I get a report card. But anyways, a couple of my colleagues have kind of raised the question about engagement and everything else like that. And so what the experience that I feel like is, and that I've seen witnessing happening, is there's a lot of expectations out there by the public that, in my opinion, is not realistic, and I don't think can be achieved just by, I just feel like there's false expectations out there that they feel like that our level of government can solve all their issues. And I'm just wondering, when we do engagements, do we ever ask, what do you feel the solutions are, or what do they feel? Do we ever go through all that kind of process? Where we get more of a wholesome discussion and then just a nice laundry list of stuff that we feel like, here we go, this is stuff that we want to do. But when I look at this stuff, and I love this stuff too, right? I love to see this, but I really don't see this all being encompassing on the city's back. And what I feel like the collaboration between other levels of government, if we don't have the great relationships with other levels of government, because they may have different policies, I'm just finding it very difficult to be able to deliver stuff that the community wants when I really feel like it's not realistic. Sorry to be like that, but I just feel like some of these goals here, they're excellent. I think we can achieve them, but I think sometimes the general public doesn't understand what it takes to achieve these outcomes. And it's sometimes way above anyone's pay grade in this horseshoe.
That's a really interesting question. You started out talking, I thought about engagement, and I'm not sure when you were talking about seeking solutions, whether you were talking about the strategic planning process or more generally in what the city does. Certainly in the strategic planning process, what I saw appearing on the ideas boards and ideas that I heard in the community consultations that were done at the 4 community centers were ideas from people about what the solution looks like, what it is they are looking for. So I think, yes, there is work being done on that, certainly in the context of the Strat plan. I can't speak to the extent to which that is part of planning or other departments' ongoing consultations, but certainly in our purview with the public engagement for the plan, people are invited. And that's been part of the vision piece to say, what do you see as the end result? The other thing I would say is education, I think, factors highly into what it is you're talking about. The more people know about what the city can and can't do, what its guiding principles and policies are, what its economic challenges are, the better they come to understand that there are limitations and what those limitations might be. But there are areas where the city has said, you know, this issue really is not in our jurisdiction. And Compass has encouraged more attention to be paid to it. And we found that although it might not be a primary responsibility of the municipality, there was lots the city could do to help solve the problem. And so I think it's important to keep in mind not just what the primary responsibilities are, but where you can also be a key player in solving the problem, even though it's not your primary responsibility.
I would also mention that when we talk about engagement, I think we have a tendency to think about it being static. So we're just collecting the public's perspective on things. But as I mentioned before, the resident panel, when people are in dialogue, I think they learn from each other. And I think the public has a lot to learn from this horseshoe in terms of what can work and what can't, what sort of constraints make it difficult to actually achieve some of the things that they want, and how they may, in some cases, not be entirely realistic. So I think that more dynamic dialogue is important. So what we've done is kind of that first step, and now we're putting it over to you folks.
Yeah, and my comments and questions I raise are no indication on how I feel about what you guys do as a committee. I feel like you do the great things. I'm just very frustrated because I hear a ton of things, and it's just, to me, I feel like I don't think some of these things are achievable, and I feel like it's just adding fuel to I guess, make everyone feel frustrated, and it's just to become a frustrated society, and I feel like it's spreading around through, and I think that's what the mayor is doing with the big city mayors and talking about mental health and everything else. I feel like it's just really, it's a lot bigger than what we are doing here at the municipality. Anyways,
I do hope that council is very excited about the notion that people are saying, we want to see you partner with other folks.
Absolutely.
And I think the good thing is that it's not on you alone in that sense. So there's a positive to take away.
Well, that's good, because I feel like what we hear, it's all us. And anyways, but thank you. I do, again, it's the best time when you guys come in. It's the only time I look forward to getting a report card.
But it's also where the plan will be very important, because the plan sets out the things that you have decided you're going to tackle. What it is that you're trying to achieve, what are the key actions or initiatives that are going to get you there, and I think that sends a very clear message to the residents in our community to say, big range of issues, big range of challenges, lots of great ideas. Here are the X number that we want to tackle, and here's how we want to do it. That puts the community on notice as to where you're investing the city's resources.
So one of the things too, and I, you know, as we go through, sorry, I'm taking up a lot of time. But I really feel that there's a certain bias about how cities operate, and that we're not truthful in what we do and everything else. Anyways, I'm getting beyond that, but I feel like, what's that? I just
You
feel like
you
there's
can
a
ring
lot
in a second time if you feel a need.
Yeah, anyways.
Thank
I think
you.
you do phenomenal work, thank you.
Councillor Owaduni has become inspired to ask some questions.
Thank you, Mayor Barry. I love this report. Thank you very much for the work that you've put into it. I still consider myself a newcomer. I moved to Canada 6 years ago. So the area around belonging, support for newcomers, welcome and inclusive community really touch me because those things are important to me in ensuring that I integrate fully into the system. There was a very interesting interaction that took place when we went door to door, and someone talked about, one of my team members was speaking to someone and said, Ayo could be a positive influence in the community. And, we chuckled when we heard the response. We said, well, if he can be a positive influence, why can't he go back to his country and do the work over there? We all laugh about it after that comment, but how do we ensure, and I don't know if you heard anything about this during your engagement, just interested in your thoughts, how do we ensure that Canadians, people that have lived here most of their lives, are aware of the benefits of newcomers? The DEI space, we spend so much time talking, you're sharing business cases and, the benefits of diversity and inclusion in the work that we do. But I feel like most of the time the narrative is more focused on the challenges and how we need to welcome newcomers and how we need to support newcomers. But we never talk about the benefits and why newcomers are being asked to come in to be a part of the economy as well. But I'm just interested in if anything came up around engagement and your thoughts just around is there a way that we can pick up that type of narrative and start looking into that as well?
It's a really interesting issue to deal with, and I think part of it may be addressing our newcomer community in various aspects of the plan, like economic development, et cetera, which then makes it increasingly clear the important role that newcomers' businesses play as they initiate them in community and find the support that they need in the community. I'm not sure, Angie, if you have a sense from a more detailed examination of some of the feedback.
Go ahead, Angie.
Thanks, Mayor, through you. I think we had the opportunity to hear from a number of newcomers to the community through our engagement, and many of them brought ideas and suggestions, which are a part of our engagement detailed notes, on how they would feel more connected to the community. Many of them said that the part of coming here that was most challenging was connecting with the broader community, and so that was a place where they provided some more in-depth thought. But my suggestion would be to loop back with some of those newcomers who have engaged and others to understand more specifically some of the items that you've mentioned and how we can highlight their experience moving forward. I know the region's done some work on that as well, but certainly interested in working with you to develop that line of questioning and for future engagement.
If I could just offer and piggyback off of what Angie said in terms of highlights. I think what you're talking about is sort of a broader narrative about newcomers. And I think what we need to hear are those community stories, those stories of success that compel others to appreciate how important they are to this community. And those stories are plentiful and they exist, and we need to harvest them.
And it's an issue that's surfacing a little more within the tech sector with all the recent layoffs. Such a high proportion of the people working in our tech sector are newcomers to the community who are often here on temporary permits, and we need to understand the value that they've brought and pay attention to that as we develop policies and strategic plans.
Wonderful. So that does appear to be all of the questions now. Certainly, we've had a very robust conversation, but I think it reflects both the passion that Council has for your work, the passion that the two of you have, and the importance that it plays for the community. So thank you, and we look forward to future visits that will see this dialogue continue as we work towards our new 20-year vision and strategic plan come, I think it's slated to be finished by June, if I remember correctly. So
That's right.
look forward to that.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
really enjoy working with all of you.
Okay, we'll now move on to 6.2, housing and homelessness, and we have Nabil Kohestani. Is Nabil here? Welcome.
I'll click, okay, and then just like with arrows, perfect.
Sorry, is this in regards to Councillor Davies' motion?
Not entirely sure what was the motion.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Go ahead.
Was there a motion that was in play or? On
There
the
is
agenda?
a motion that we'll be dealing with later on, but.
Oh, I
sorry.
think it was at the end of the agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nabil Kohestani, and tonight I'll be discussing the homeless crisis in Kitchener. It's evident that Kitchener has been dealing with the homeless problem these past few years. It hurts to see a city where I grew up in and where I grew up most of my life turn out like this. Victoria Park and downtown Kitchener were a staple of my childhood and many others as well. Unfortunately, both areas are now riddled with homeless encampments, showing that Kitchener lacks the support of how to support the homeless population. Many residents, including myself, feel uncomfortable or unsafe walking around in these areas, and authorities have even been notified of issues such as sex trafficking or drug abuse happening by teenagers who visit these encampments. I'm sympathetic to both sides, and I appreciate the work that has been done by Mr. Vrbanovich, the City Council, and previous delegates. But we need to ask ourselves, what will happen to the spring? What will happen to the homeless population around then and the encampments around then? This is something that I urge all of you to think about and why I'm proposing several steps that should be taken. One of these steps is concerning Bill 23 and the inclusionary zoning bylaw. Bill 23 proposes that more homes will be built faster to help address the housing crisis in Ontario. Part of the bill states, and I quote, "This legislation supports regulatory changes to provide certainty regarding inclusionary zoning rules with a maximum 25-year affordability period, a 5% cap on the inclusionary zoning units, and a standardized approach to determining the price or rent of an affordable unit under an inclusionary zoning program," end quote. The term affordable is used very loosely here. How will we know that these houses will be affordable in the next few generations or future generations to come? Additionally, the 5% cap rate only accounts for certain properties. Not every property is included here. An article written by Liz Montero, for the record, included a perspective from a resident who lives in Victoria Park. In the article, the resident claims that the 5% cap rate on affordable housing is too low and should be much higher. The small percentage rate won't even guarantee housing for the homeless. If anything, inclusionary zoning will continue to favor those with properties and will not favor those who are in desperate need of property. Bringing change to the housing market is the biggest step forward to solving the homeless crisis in Kitchener. I also wanted to discuss the creation of programs that support homeless housing. We've seen programs such as the YW Block Line that have been specifically designed to build affordable housing for the homeless women. Not only did it provide them with a place to live, but it gave them hope, something that these encampments do not offer. The homes were built with support such as daily life skills, crisis management, and food bank services. The creation of more housing programs that are available for the homeless population is what the city needs. I don't want Kitchener to be known as a tent city for years to come. I want the future generation to experience what I was able to experience in Victoria Park or downtown Kitchener when I was a kid. But it won't happen until affordable housing changes and the homeless population is respected. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think you'll find that your council agrees with pretty much everything you said. The only question I have is, have you or are you planning on making this presentation to our regional council?
I mean, is this going to be like another council meeting or like?
Right.
I'd be more than happy to. I'd be more than happy to.
Yeah, so, yeah, and the reason I would say that is because it's like providing homeless supports and shelters is squarely in their jurisdiction. We provide supports, for example, the YW block line item that you brought up is something that I think we're all very proud of supporting, but I would argue I supported myself. Yeah. But the donation of those lands, I would argue, is very much outside of our jurisdiction, even in an attempt to try and address the situation. So that's my only, actually, it's a request. I really hope that you do go make this exact presentation to the region of Waterloo, because they are our partner in trying to deal with the situation. So thank you.
For sure. Yeah, no worries.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for coming in. I like the two points that you're touching on, the inclusionary zoning, which I know is currently being discussed with the other municipalities and with the region. And as you mentioned, you quoted Bill 23 in that clause. What to you would be affordable, and what type of cap would you like to see placed on this?
I believe affordable is something that is able to be attained by everyone. Like, we had a presentation earlier that talked about equity and having housing for older generation of people as well. I feel like affordability can come down to people who are marginalized as well, such as the homeless or other minority groups. And I believe that affordable can mean that it brings change to them. It allows them to have the same resources that, for example, we are privileged in this sense, and minority groups or marginalized groups such as the homeless aren't able to experience. So I believe that affordable would be something that would be suitable in this category.
Okay. The other thing you brought up was the donating of properties, and in fact, you pointed out the YWCA property, and I think that's important that municipalities, some of the tools we don't have available to us, but that is certainly a tool that we do have. So, thank you for coming in.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I'm just going to piggyback on Councillor Davies' request to reach out to regional government. I've been an advocate and a lobbyist for many, many years in the healthcare sector. There's two other levels of government that have a huge role in helping with this issue. And quite often it's the same people repeatedly reaching out to the Premier or the Prime Minister or their elected MPs or MPPs. What needs to happen, that I believe, is we need to have new voices reach out to their other elected officials. It's very easy for citizens to, kind of pile on us as city councillors, because I would say we're the most accessible elected officials that you will probably actually, see. But what we need to happen is for voices like yours, who may not have reached out to those other two levels, to reach out to those other two levels, to put pressure on the federal and the provincial government to help municipalities in regions, because as Councillor Davis said, there's only so much we can do. But in essence, it's a top-down, we get all the crap thrown on us, but it really it's not, we haven't created this mess. We want to try to find solutions, but we're limited as to what we can actually do. So for those millions who are watching at home right now, I highly encourage you to reach out to your elected officials. You're beyond regional, reach out to your MPPs and your MPs and keep on reaching out to them. And let's keep, we need to keep this at the forefront, as opposed to, in 2 years' time, if we've moved back to a normal world, whatever that looks like now, it'll be forgotten. And so my hope is that doesn't happen, but, I encourage people to reach out to the other two levels of government, because they can provide the money if they really want to. That's all. 100%. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Councillor Deneau. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you too. Thank you so much for coming in tonight. That was such a passionate speech, and I really appreciate it. You're a fresh, new, young voice. Okay, everybody's kind of young to me, but I really appreciated your message, and also to piggyback on what's been said here. It's important for us to hear it. It's really important for the regional council to hear it, and I'm wondering if maybe staff could help you in terms of being a delegation, but I just Googled on here, Region of Waterloo appear as a delegation, and it pops right up with a form for you to fill in and go there and appear, and you'll get to speak to Mayor Barry again as well. But yeah, really appreciate you coming in tonight, and thank you for your passion, and thank you for caring.
No,
honestly.
I believe that we should all care. You know, it's something that it hurts, you know, when you go, you walk like downtown Kitchener.
It does.
Victoria Park. Like, I know people in here, I was going to get more into this, but I know people in here have kids, or people in here, they want to raise kids, they want to have families. I'm 20 years old, and I believe that in the future, I want to have a family as well, and I want to take them to Victoria Park. I want to show them landmarks of Kitchener, and I want to show them it in a place that's peaceful, in a place that I was able to experience it. And like, I also have like I know I couldn't even get into this, but like, this is from like the region of Waterloo. I know we were talking about this just now as well, but this is just all of the people who testified from the injunction from Superior Court who were planning on getting evicted. And it's heartbreaking reading some of these cases. It's really heartbreaking reading how they're dealing with all these issues such as drug addiction, mental health. Mm-hmm. And some of them aren't like, they're too afraid to go into the shelters, the homeless shelters as well. So I believe that fixing the housing crisis and providing affordability, like providing affordable homes, and as some other councillors have stated, focusing on these housing programs, that's like the best way to help this and to potentially solve this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Urbanovic. I know you're excited to see Mayor Urbanovic again and the other side. But
not sure how to take that, Councillor Ioannidis, but anyway, please continue.
But you know, the one example that you showed about the land and stuff that the city donated, and I know in one of our economic development plans during the pandemic, I think we committed up to $15 million of land value to be used for that purpose. So I think there's probably at least another $10 more million to $12 more million yet to come from us. So I mean, I don't want you to leave here to feel like that, you know, this. Mm-hmm. We don't take responsibility. We do. I think we take a lot more responsibility than what other municipalities may do within their jurisdiction. But we do step up to the plate. So I want you to be aware of that.
For sure, for sure.
And Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Ioannidis quickly touched on the point that I was going to make. It's good on you for coming forward. It's even more so a compliment to you to care for those that are least fortunate, that have the least means, and that's why I keyed in to make sure that you as a young individual don't have the mindset or not aware of all the facts, that thinking that this council for the city of Kitchener does not care, does not have respect for the homeless, where that's completely contrary of the facts. Councillor Ioannidis addressed the $50 million from overall $110 million allocation towards economic development. And that's a tremendous amount of money that's being placed to address prosperity, not necessarily for all those that have the means, but those that have the least as well. So we have uplifting of quality of life for all citizens in the city of Kitchener, and that's addressing dollars that are outside of the jurisdiction of the city of Kitchener. And I think that's maybe a little bit more of awareness for you coming forward. We're glad you did that. Again, you have to lobby to us as well, but more importantly to the region of Waterloo, for whom housing is a mandate, to your MPP and MPs as well, addressing where the additional dollars need to come in, where partnerships can work, like the one on Block Line, where it's the City of Kitchener, Regional Waterloo, the federal government coming together and allocating and providing opportunities for those that probably had no hope, and that's important. And on top of it, of course, I think the other thing that's missed a little bit is that we've set housing for all as a priority, as part of a strategic plan. And it's important of us as a council, and I asked this question of the delegation before you, about, housing across the continuum. It's affordable housing, it's assisted housing, it's housing for seniors so that they're not feeling displaced, that they have options as well. And it's setting the policies in place that create more options for all our citizens. So once more, thank you. More than a comment and a question to you. I will quickly ask you, though, actually, if you allow, you said, respecting of our homeless, and I think that's absolutely an important point to keep in mind. It's not necessarily the city of Kitchener, but where have you seen a level of disrespect for the homeless in our community so that we can be conscious of it, so that you have the platform to make that, further elaboration?
Disrespect amongst the homeless, it's widespread, honestly. Like, when you're walking around Victoria Park, like, even with the whole Christmas lights thing, I get it, people want to go, they want to, see the Christmas lights, and I respect that. Like, it's a holiday and whatnot, they're with their families. But there's other people that, they go out of their way to just, kind of make it hard for the homeless people at that scenario. At the end of the day, these are just humans as well, walking over their tents and not really caring about it. And it's just unfortunate. And I feel like there should be much more of a, if they had, like I said, if they had housing, they wouldn't have been disrespected so much. And it's unfortunate, I just really hope that there's some sort of change in legislation, and I know it's a provincial bill as well, and it's hard to bring change to that, but like I said, if you have Kitchener residents saying, from Victoria Park, saying that the bill should be, the price cap should be raised, that says a lot as well, so.
Well, thank you. I agree with you. Compassion needs to be there, and through compassion, we need to find good ideas. So, thanks again.
Okay, those are all the questions. Thanks so much, Nabil, for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us. These are certainly issues that this council has been grappling with and working collaboratively with the other orders of government, and it's one that I think is going to continue to be at the top of our efforts for some time yet. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Rob Bidden. Is Rob Bidden here? Is Mr. Bidden online? No. Okay. We'll move on then, and we'll move to reports of the committees. Councillor Davey, Audit Committee, please. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Ioannidis that the 3 items coming from Audit Committee be approved.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Moving on to Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting with the note that item 7.2.e, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 507 Frederick Street, 40, 44, and 48 Becker Street is being deferred to the council meeting on Monday, February 27th, 2023, and we'll be dealing with that later as an amendment. Councillor Singh, if you can bring this report forward, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and other than the mentioned item that's been deferred, the items coming from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chapman, for endorsement.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Regional Council update, just a few items to update folks on, several of which have certainly been in the news. But as Council is aware, on Friday, the region did receive a decision from Justice Valente pertaining to the property at Victoria and Weber, and the region is certainly reviewing that decision and what it means in terms of both that site and discussing it with area partners in terms of its impacts on other encampments throughout the region. Secondly, the issue of a managed encampment site. Council will recall that the original timeline that was anticipated by the region had hoped to see that facility up and running by the end of February. It's looking now like it will be into March or perhaps even a little longer. But it is something that staff continue to actively pursue and review in light of the need. The region too is grappling with our regional budget, and those discussions continue later this week. And that would be the regional update. So if there aren't any questions, I will move on to 9.2, notice of motion. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is brief, so I will read it out. I would also note that it's been seconded by Councillor Schneider. Whereas Ontario has a significant housing shortage necessitating an increase in both affordable and general supply, whereas the province has mandated the creation of 1.5 million new homes over 10 years via Bill 23, More Houses Built Faster Act, with Kitchener's share being 35,000 new dwellings. Whereas infill development is generally preferred to greenfield development and urban sprawl for both financial and environmental sustainability. Whereas infill development has and will continue to displace existing residents, often with affordable rental agreements. And whereas Kitchener Council acknowledges housing as a basic human right and has approved a Housing for All strategy, therefore be it resolved that where existing rental housing cannot or will not be preserved, staff make recommendations on how the city can support the transitioning of displaced residents. Therefore, be it further resolved that staff be directed to report back by the end of 2023 with recommendations on tools and best practices that may be implemented immediately, tools that may require additional development, possibly as part of Kitchener's official plan review, and suggested advocacy to other orders of government where support may be outside of our jurisdiction. Therefore, be it further resolved this resolution be circulated to the region of Waterloo and other local municipalities should they choose to partner and or provide consistency of response to this growing challenge throughout our region, and therefore be it finally resolved that this resolution be circulated to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
Okay, thank you. That has been moved and seconded. We do have some questions or comments. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my question has to do with how this differs from what's being proposed in the budget around affordable housing study or a housing study, and likewise how it differs from what's being done currently at the Joint Services Initiatives group at that table.
Who wants to take that? I guess it's Councillor Davey. If you can. Okay, well, you can.
I mean, based on the reports that we have, right?
It's your motion, Councillor Davey, so we'll start with you.
Yes, certainly. So I would defer to staff on the differences with the. I'm not familiar with the mandate of the latter piece, and pardon me, I forgot the first part of the question.
Yeah, I'm just looking. If we go back to the budget and in the items that we've been asked to delegate that $1.5 million,
right.
One of them was on housing, and
right.
It talked about looking at, the different housing options and how we were going to.
Right,
and both those reports are coming to us at the end of 2023.
Certainly. So I don't believe that option, at least in the issue paper that I read, had made any references to supporting displacement. It spoke about lodging houses and undergoing a planning review, but I would defer to Mr. Stevenson to highlight any discrepancies.
See, Mr. Reedman, yes, Mr. Reedman,
Yeah, through the mayor. So the main difference is that displacement had not been included in the scope of work previously, and so that is a body of work that we think we can cover within the budget outlined in the issue paper, but this motion further reinforces that work be included.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not
Councillor
finished.
Chapman, you still have the floor.
Okay, so, and what about the joint services initiatives?
Mr. Chapman, do you want to comment on that, or?
So through the mayor, Councillor Chapman, can you clarify specifically with respect to the joint service program?
Yeah, in the report we received, one of them had to do with affordable housing and how it was being discussed jointly with the region and the city of Waterloo, I guess. So I was just wondering how it differs from what's being proposed here.
So I'd again defer to Mr. Reedman or Mr. Stevenson on that specific joint service initiative.
Mr. Reedman?
Yeah, through the mayor, that joint services initiative is primarily around inclusionary zoning, and that's the study and the work that we're doing with Waterloo and the other municipalities to advance the inclusionary zoning work to make sure we have a level playing field across the region.
Okay, can I propose an amendment to what's being proposed here? I mean, it's not that I'm against it, but if we're trying to hone in on more specific items, then would I do that now, or
Yeah, do you have a specific amendment, and
yeah,
I
so
presume you have it in writing to give to the clerk?
What's in my handwriting here? So, okay, I can key it in and pass it on. The amendment would be something along these lines. Therefore, be it resolved that staff review the rental replacement bylaw found elsewhere in Ontario to determine its benefits and applicability here. So it's really just adding to what's presently here and giving another specific direction to staff.
Okay, so first I'll ask, is there a seconder for the amendment?
Oh.
Councillor Davey? Okay, thank you.
Could you read that again?
Yeah, we do. Okay, sorry. Therefore, be it resolved that staff review the rental replacement bylaws which are found elsewhere in Ontario to determine if it would benefit and be applicable here.
Sorry, can you clarify when you're referencing rental replacement, what do you mean by
Yeah,
that?
apparently Toronto and I'm not sure what other cities have a rental replacement bylaw. And so to see if that would be something we could apply here. So basically what it means is if somebody is evicted for a new development, there would have to be a clear replacement plan in place, including things like, rent that's at the same level. And so it's really part of the landlord and tenant board or whatever its current wording is. Okay. But it would be to say, could we adopt a similar bylaw here in Kitchener?
Okay, thank you. Got several people in the queue. Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, I have other amendments, but I'll loop back. I think we are just discussing this amendment now. Correct? Is that the order?
Sorry, go ahead.
Is the order to just discuss Councillor Chapman's amendment, or are we adding on to other things?
We will deal with the whole thing, but I will deal with her amendment first.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Oh, I will loop back in for other things, but yes, I just approve of that amendment. I'll cue back in when we're ready to move past her amendment.
Well, no, not just dealing with.
I can speak to the whole
yes,
piece?
please go
Okay,
ahead. Yes.
sorry. So I'll introduce, I'd like to also, I am very supportive of this. I think displacement has come up quite regularly. I think we're losing a lot of affordable units, and so I think it's our due diligence as people who approve planning and development to consider that as part of the whole picture of how we can influence protecting affordable unit stock. And I appreciate Councillor Chapman's suggestion, knowing that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can kind of look at the success of other cities in creating replacements and places for people to move to as an answer, as one of the tools in the toolbox. I guess one area that I'd like to add some wording just to make it more accessible and approachable is we've often referred to staff, and I know that we have some good partnerships, and sometimes community organizations can be, partnered with and funded to also explore the supporting of transitioning people who are being displaced. So I just wanted to add that as an amendment after we've considered Councillor Chapman's. And then also, Oh, and I just wanted to also amend a bit of the wording around the timing, that staff be encouraged to report back throughout, and that we can implement recommendations on an ongoing basis. My only worry is that we have the housing crisis now, and so if we do come up with good strategies for affordable housing, that we don't have to wait till January of 2024 to act on those, that the immediacy could be considered throughout the year.
Okay, so I will come to your amendments afterwards. Just give me 1 second, Councillor Singh. I'll come to your amendments afterwards, subject to them being seconded. I will just remind everyone that, and this is the first sort of round of meetings in terms of this council, but I just want to remind everyone that any amendments need to be provided in writing for the clerk. So I'll sort of allow it to go to today. I just want everyone to be aware of that for future meetings. Councillor Singh, you had a point of clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure I key in early before we carry on the discussion about Councillor Chapman's amendment. This question might be more for the clerk. Madam Clerk, the motion that's before us addresses with recommendations on tools and best practices. I'm assuming those best practices, and Councillor Davey can clarify as well, would revolve around looking at other municipalities similar to Toronto as well. So when there's a motion that rephrases the same intent and direction of the main motion, is there an issue with that?
Madam Clerk.
Through the chair, so it is at the discretion of the individual council member to clarify any wording in the motion. So if best practices needs to be clarified to cite particular agencies, that is the discretion of the individual council member.
So could I ask for clarification from
Councillor Davey?
Councillor Davey?
Yes, Councillor Singh, that was exactly my intention. In fact, I think Mr. Stevenson and I mentioned the rental agreements in other municipalities. I just have a fan of brevity and motions, so and I like to leave them the latitude, but I don't see any harm in Councillor Chapman's amendment with that respect.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. And through you to Councillor Davey. First of all, I wanted to thank you very much for this motion. This is really, really important, and I think it's something that we'll be dealing with over the next few years as we continue to have infill projects come before us. And it's really important to think about what this means to residents who may be affected. So thank you so much for this. My question was around the timing of it, and I have a concern about that as well. I'm wondering, is this something that you've spoken with staff about in terms of the timing, and maybe if you can clarify that? I think we'd all like to see it done earlier.
Councillor Davey?
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to answer, and if staff wants to chime in as well. But the reality is we all know that our planning department has been challenged with a high number of a tremendous amount of work. And this was prior to Bills 109, which, as we all know, dramatically reduced the turnaround time for staff to be able to prepare reports. And then on top of that, we now have Bill 23, which turns much of all of what we do on its head. So to be honest, I was kind of expecting staff to come back and say, yeah, sure, we can do this. Let's hire a whole bunch more people. And they did not. They committed to the end of 2023, so I did not push beyond that.
That's great. Thank you. And I think that really provides clarity in terms of, we would all like to see it done sooner, but thank you, staff, for agreeing to this.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. And just a little bit of clarification, if I can get from Councillor Davey. Are you saying for everything should be within what's available during our jurisdiction? Is that what? Is that what you mean, or we give support?
Yeah, absolutely. So I specifically put in, well, you know me, I'm big on jurisdiction.
I know, that's why I want to make sure the clarification's there.
So that's why I specifically put in here where it's outside of our jurisdiction, where staff sees gaps in their professional opinion, to bring back advocacy pieces so we can advocate to the region or the province as we see that.
Okay, so it's not asking to be committing $2 or anything like that, you're just asking for advocacy?
Advocacy, if it's outside of our jurisdiction. If there's anything inside our jurisdiction that may include dollars, that should be presented as an option, right?
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, you could just nod to it, Councillor Davey. I don't want to add another amendment. I'm assuming your motion also addresses consultation with Affordable Housing Committee as well as the Development Committee as well, so broader consultation. I'm assuming? Yes. Okay. All right, good. So if that's part of the direction, if I could just make quick comments, I think this is absolutely necessary. I think more so for a sense of realization and understanding for this council and members of a community to look at all the available tools, any tools that can be applied that the laws allow. We absolutely have to, because again, we have to respect the rights and privileges of the existing tenants where they can be protected. And anywhere we can't, we have to have a better realization. A lot of times there's misunderstanding within the public, and they seek to us to safeguard them with means that are outside of our control, with laws that are outside of the jurisdiction of this council. So this will give a better guideline and understanding for this council and the broader community. And more importantly, besides adopting best practices that we can, outside of that, if that doesn't go as far to really achieve the full benefit that we desire, the very least, it will give us a better understanding and determination of how do we best advocate on behalf of those residents as well, so that they do feel that this council is trying to fight for them. But in cases where they expect to stop something, where we can't do that, I think this review will outline that process better, where it's not as fully understood, again, by this council and as well as the members of the community. So I think this is a good step forward. Thank you.
Okay, nobody else being in the queue right now then, I'll deal with Councillor Chapman's amendment first. Sorry? Councillor Davies seconded the amendment. And so the amendment, as it reads, is therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review the rental replacement bylaws found elsewhere in Ontario to determine its benefits and its applicability in Kitchener. Any further dialogue? If not, those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Councillor Clancy, you want to bring your amendment forward?
So I have two, and it's more rewording. So the first is just, I think it's that we are directing staff to make recommendations on how the city can support transitioning displaced residents. I just wanted to ask for some rewording that staff in partnership with community stakeholders be funded to support the transitioning. So a reword just to include, I know for a lot of our housing programs, and just as an example, the Social Development Center as an eviction prevention program, they're actively involved in supporting, when we think of lanes, I think that partnership between grassroots organizations and staff is an important.
Councillor Clancy, the wording is on the screen. What wording are you looking for?
Yeah, so for the first, therefore be it resolved, it would read, therefore be it resolved that where existing rental housing cannot or will not be preserved.
Hold on, can you slow down so that staff can capture it, please?
Sorry.
Okay, continue.
Cannot or will not be preserved, comma, space staff in partnership with community stakeholders be funded to support recommendations on how the city can make recommendations on how the city can support the transitioning of displaced residents. Sorry. Thank you.
So just so that there's some clarity here, and we might have to ask the clerk for some assistance here. The earlier report, or the recommendation, the ultimate recommendation we'll be dealing with is looking for staff to come back with tools and practices. This appears, in fact, to be giving more specific direction about funding community stakeholders. Is that your intention?
So I think there's two parts that are advantageous to including community partners in this motion. Is one, much of the work has been done with certain community groups, so they're actively doing this work. And so I think it's efficient to have staff and community stakeholders partner. But I recognize that community stakeholders don't want to volunteer. They're trying to fund some pretty limited funded positions. So just want to recognize that in the wording.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is the Councillor Davies' motion is not looking for specific action today beyond directing staff to make recommendations and to look at tools and best practices and so on. Yours is going one step beyond that, and actually speaking to funding community stakeholders to do this work. So you're not your amendment is no longer asking that this be looked at and studied and a report to come back. You're actually making an amendment, which you're entitled to do if there's a seconder, but I just think people need to be clear that this is actually looking at action now as opposed to simply asking staff to bring a report back. Is that your intention?
Yes, I feel like we've had, just like we had the report on the inner suburbs from SDC, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel, and I don't think we would. I have total confidence in our staff, and if it's preferred that they do the work in-house, I just thought that would be an added layer to enrich the motion.
Okay, and then the second part of your motion, I'm going to go to staff to ask for staff comment on that. But if you want to comment on the second part of your motion? Oh, sorry, Mr. Chapman, you want to jump in now? Okay, go ahead. Okay, Councillor Clancy, what's your second amendment?
So again, it's just a rewording, and it's just about the timing that they can. I just wanted to give the flexibility for staff to report on an ongoing basis, like maybe not every month, but I hesitate to wait until 2024, so I just wanted to give the flexibility that staff can make recommendations as they emerge, so we can be more nimble, knowing how critical our housing situation is at the moment. I just wanted to kind of make the wording more flexible, so my concern is that, if we get a good idea or we get some findings in July about, some rental replacement policies, that we don't need to wait to the end of 2023 to act on it, that we have the flexibility and encouragement to be more nimble.
So to be clear, the wording that's there right now does not mean that it can't come back before the end of 2023. But, okay, so does this reflect your wording that you want?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so is there a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Chapman, thank you. Mr. Chapman, do you want to comment?
Through Mr. Mayor, I think we would agree with Councillor Clancy's objective that if there are partnerships with community organizations that are better positioned to deliver services and supports, that it's in our interest to explore those. I would share your concern, though, that the purpose of the motion, as I understand it, is to recommend tools, approaches, and practices, and so to direct staff at this point in time to fund agencies to deliver programs that are not yet developed would seem to be premature. What I would suggest is in the second operative clause that's in Councillor Davies' motion, it would be entirely appropriate to add additional language to direct staff to explore the potential for partnerships with community agencies as a part of these tools and practices. And so those recommendations would be explored and come back in the course of 2023.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Clancy, in light of that, did you want to change your amendment to reflect that?
I mean, I appreciate that if there's that flexibility, then the wording doesn't need to be changed. I just wanted, for the first motion, is that what you're saying, Mr. Chapman? Sorry.
Mr. Chapman?
The way I would read the first motion is that Council would be deciding today that you will fund agencies to deliver programs before Council has actually decided on what those programs will be. And so I don't know how Council can make that decision tonight. I think what you can do is express a desire to partner with agencies where appropriate, to direct staff to look at those opportunities and consider them as part of the recommendations that come back to Council in 2023.
That's great idea. So perhaps remove the first amendment and include community stakeholders in the second. And maybe would you like me to follow up with wording to include that?
Well, I think we need to know what we're voting on now, so if you
Sure.
have wording, if you can indicate that to the clerk.
Okay, so, sorry, just to clarify, Mr. Chapman, do you recommend that just the funding portion of the amendment be removed? Or would you recommend putting community stakeholders into the second amendment?
So through the chair, Mr. Mayor, if you're looking for advice, I would take the second operative clause in Councillor Davies' motion, and after you talk about tools that can be implemented immediately, tools that may require additional development as part of the OP, there's a semicolon. I would say something like including giving consideration to where the city might partner with community stakeholders to support the transitioning of displaced residents, and then the rest would follow. And so you're directing us to consider where partnerships may be possible, and that would form part of our recommendations back to Council.
Thank you.
Okay. So, do you want to repeat that, Mr. Chapman? Or Madam Clerk, did you capture that? Yeah, okay, we're good. Yes, Councillor Ioannidis?
Explain to Councillor Clancy that the rest of the stuff would be gone, if that's what Mr. Chapman's suggesting.
Well, yeah.
Okay, because I don't think she understands that.
No.
Pardon me, what would be gone?
So to be clear, first of all, there's a motion on the floor that's been moved and seconded, and so it's your motion. I will let you make a change to it. I'll have to ask Councillor Chapman if she concurs. But that top part would be gone.
Yes.
And would be replaced with the third paragraph.
Yeah, so I think instead of, like, if we're looking at the same screen, instead of doing two separate pieces, kind of just adding the stakeholder bit to the other amendment. So yes, that makes sense to me.
Okay, so just wait for a moment until the clerk is
Thank you
finished
for the
making those
recommendation.
amendments.
So just adding a layer of flexibility around timing and adding a layer of flexibility about partnership possibilities. Thank you. Just
Okay, and it should be that staff be to explore the potential to work with community stake. Actually, there's two works there to work. And then get rid of that second work. And the third too. Okay, great. So Councillor Clancy, does that reflect your
Yeah, as
amendment?
long, for sure. Thank you, Mayor
Okay.
Urbanovich. As long as, like, I know we say report back at the end, just as long, I think that timing comment isn't needed, you're saying.
Well, they would report back by the end of 2023, so if it's done sooner, they would report back sooner.
Right.
Okay, Councillor Chapman, are you fine with that revised amendment? Okay, so it has been moved by and seconded. Councillor Chapman, you still want to say something?
Through the chair, to avoid belaboring it, Mr. Mayor, I think the intent was not about establishing the tools, it was to implement or deliver the tools. That's what I heard Councillor Clancy saying, that this is about working with partners to deliver these programs, not to establish them. And so I would suggest that it was intended to be implement or deliver.
I'm sure staff would consult with them anyway on getting recommendations, so.
Okay, so you're both fine with this wording? Okay, Councillor Davey, over to you.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to be a stickler, except we are going to be circulating this to our peer municipalities in the region as well. So I'm not sure if I can at this point, but I would just suggest that we actually also include Councillor Chapman's amendment, because it is, if I'm reading this motion, it does stick out as somewhat being redundant if it's on its own. So I would add it like
within?
Yeah, I would add it within the same clause where it says after best practices, including, and then the portion that Councillor Chapman added, just so it's explicit. Does that make sense? So if you're looking at the
After tools?
yeah, the second clause.
Yeah.
After tools and best practices, then you would put, sorry, where's Councillor Chapman's motion up there? Yes, there you go, exactly.
I think it's better to reword than that.
No, it's fine.
So do we, like what? Oh.
Still being edited.
Plus, it's already been voted on, right? That's first clause. It's already been voted on, so it's part of it.
Good.
Mr. Reedman, you wanted to?
Yes, through the mayor, just to clear up the language a little bit, the highlighted blue that staff be directed is redundant since that's at the beginning of the sentence as well. So I think that could just be removed and it's still the same direction.
Mr. Reedman, you have?
Yeah, just the words that staff be directed in highlighted in blue, because that's the beginning sentence, the beginning of the paragraph.
Projects. Yeah.
Okay, So is this where we're at now? I just want to, before I start reviewing it.
So through the chair, I believe what's on the screen captures the original motion with the amendments proposed by Councillor Chapman and Councillor Clancy.
And therefore be it further resolved that staff be directed to report back by the end of 2023 with recommendations on tools and best practices that may be implemented immediately, tools that may require additional development, possibly as part of Kitchener's official plan review, and suggested advocacy to other orders of government where support may be outside of our jurisdiction. Okay, I think staff's going to have to do some cleaning up of this afterwards, but the general principle, I think, is there, because like right now it's just not flowing the way it needs to. So Councillor Clancy, is this reflective of what all the principles that you're looking for?
Yes.
And Councillor Chapman is the seconder, you're fine with that?
Worded, I think it should go back to how it was worded before. If it's going to remain as a separate clause.
Okay, so are the core principles there? I think we're saying that staff will clean up the wording. We need to move on, quite frankly, and this is why I'm just going to reemphasize what I said earlier. It's really important for people to work with staff ahead of time, and also to make sure that we have amendments in writing. So
what we're voting on are these two clauses, is that correct?
Just one.
the principle with the understanding that the wording may be adjusted to.
But these two that we have in front of us?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good.
Okay, everyone's clear on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Now the main motion as amended, and I too will want to thank you, Councillor Davey, for bringing the motion forward. I think it is something that we know is being faced by our community and others as we deal with some of these projects, and I think it'd be helpful to have some new tools in our toolbox to help us in this regard. So with that, it's been moved and seconded, and so as amended, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Any questions and answers? There being none, bylaws. Madam Clerk, are there any additional bylaws?
Through the chair, we do have one additional bylaw related to the planning item 7.2.d for 525 New Dundee Road.
Okay, thank you. Somebody want to move the bylaws? Councillor Johnson, Councillor Michaud. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Somebody want to move that the council resolve itself into committee of the whole? Moved by Councillor Davies, seconded by Councillor Deneau. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Johnson has asked that I chair committee of the whole today. You'll notice that we only have some administrative reports, so we do need someone to move those. Councillor Chapman, are you moving them, or do you have a question? Okay, you're moving them. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I had a question with 12.1.c, the Joint Services Initiatives. And I just wondered if there was any talk or movement to include more joint initiative topics in the discussions, given the provincial plan to review the two-tiered system here. Like, are there other services that we can be talking about jointly with the other municipalities?
So maybe I'll take the initial approach to that, and then staff can add. I mean, as the report notes, there's a long history over many years of collaboration between orders of government, primarily with Kitchener-Waterloo, but also with others throughout the region, whether we're talking about fire dispatch, which, as we know, we do for all 7 municipalities in the region, whether we talk about joint purchasing initiatives, which happen between all 8 municipalities, and others. There's a number that are focused on in the report. At this point in time, there is no clarity in terms of in what direction the province may be going in terms of reviewing. It's presumptuous, despite media reports, quite frankly, to assume that the province is taking this down any direction beyond what they indicated, which was the implementation of Bill 23. And so, we wait to hear what some of that direction might be going forward.
Yeah, and I'm not assuming anything. I'm just wondering if there are things that we should be sort of being, out of the blocks ahead of anything that might come. But that's fine.
So Mr. Chapman, I mean, obviously this is a topic of conversation amongst the CAOs from time to time. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Through the Mayor, I think you've covered it well. All I would say is I think we actually have a very good news story to tell about collaboration in the region. And so rather than waiting for a provincial announcement to generate activity, for decades we've been doing this work. And so I think it's actually a very positive thing that it doesn't motivate us to do more because we've been doing it consistently for so long. 2 recent examples, as the Mayor indicated, are the consolidation of fire dispatch. And so we have a system now where the services that should be shared are shared, and those that are unique and different, like volunteer versus full-time fire departments, remain at the local level. I think about things like the Regional Road Maintenance Agreement. That continues to be optimized every time it comes forward for renewal. And so I think we've been at this for a long time and we'll continue to stick at it, but this announcement doesn't change that.
Okay. My second question had to do with the item 12.1.b, the procurement item. So these are referred to as bids that were submitted for different things. How does that differ from tenders or RFPs? And that's my first question. And the second question has to do with, do we get more information about, what bids were submitted or just the final bidder or the top bid?
Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the chair, this is the quarterly information report that comes to council as part of the procurement bylaw. So all of the, they're both tenders and RFPs in terms of on this list. They're essentially within budget, and so that is the list of awards that have gone through in the last quarter. And so that information is something that we bring back to council 4 times a year as part of that.
But it doesn't include all the information from all the different bids.
So through the chair, this is consistent with the reporting of information that we've provided previously. For any bids that are within budget, we provided in the summary level. If there was an over budget item that would have to come to council, that is the reports that you're used to seeing. All the items on this list were within budget or within the authority that's provided through the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chapman, you want to add something?
Through the chair, all I would add is that on the website, on the city's bids and tender page, there is much more information on especially tenders that I believe Mr. Lautenbach does show the individual bids for the tenders, and so there is more detail there. In the case of RFPs, they're different, but I would suggest this is the summary. On the website is a lot of detail about each procurement.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, through the list of the tenders and the procurement list, just trying to highlight, I think there's a lot of good news story here, so I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. A lot of the road resurfacing, from what it was budgeted and from what the ultimate tender awarded, is significantly lower. Just as an example, on page 20 of 26 for 2nd Avenue, budgeted 4.2, bid was 2.9. Then there's many others as well. There's almost like in many cases, $1 million to $500,000 difference between the road resurfacing. Is there a reason for that? I mean, I'm happy to see that. I'm guessing most of it is going back into reserve, but these are significantly lower than the budgeted amount. Were we anticipating this, or is this coming as a surprise to staff as well?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, and so this is a function of us getting contracts out on the street early as well, and so that was something that was referenced earlier, or late last year when we put these tenders out before the budget call. Getting these tenders out in advance sometimes results in favorable pricing, which is the case in the ones you've pointed out today.
So this is the I told you so parade for those that were the naysayers saying this takes away control from council. Okay, all right. No, anyways, the joking aside, I mean, there's a lot of monies here. Because if it's outside of our presupposed expectation, are we anticipating a much higher surplus in our road resurfacing? Can we broaden the work projected for 2023 and onward because of the tenders awarded?
Mr. Reedman?
Yeah, through the mayor, and so this goes into the reserve account and then is used to offset tenders that might come in later in the season at higher prices, and so this is part of our annual flow, and if there is additional capacity in future years, we would use that to beef up the program.
But this would not free up opportunity for additional road work or even potential trails and stuff?
Through the chair, likely not at this point, as we still have tenders that are going out for different road reconstruction projects. We want to make sure we deliver on our planned work for 2023.
When would we be able to see the ultimate, like the, how the surplus tallies? More closer to the end of the year?
Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the chair, that is something that we do track and we show in the budget as well in terms of in our WIP program, whether we're over or under, and that carries forward. And so it is something that as we get through the year or go through the year, we have a better sense of, as tenders come through, if they're favorable pricing, obviously we can look at how that factors into the next year's budget. So it is factored in terms of what you see, in terms of available funding that's then put to other projects that you have already identified in the forecast.
No, I didn't have any doubt that it would support future budgets. I wasn't sure if mid-year, at some point, could it create opportunities that we could look at some other priorities as well. But I guess that's something that can be explored later by council. Thank you.
Mr. Chapman? Through the mayor, I would just add, though, that the funding for those projects are water, sewer, and stormwater, and so the only projects that would be eligible are water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure projects, even if council were to reallocate it. Do not. Road resurfacing is typically tax supported or federal gas tax, but reconstruction is water, sewer, and storm.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So, Mr. Chapman, just further to the report, I know it's in there, but because we do have a viewing audience this evening, I'm wondering if you can just briefly just highlight a couple of the key points in the shared services report. Thanks. Oh, no worries.
So through the chair, one of the ones that we're particularly proud of, which is a customer service improvement, is the Getting Around app, which speaks to progress on winter maintenance activity during a full plow event. So often residents will call and say, why has my street not been plowed, or when will it be plowed? And so this is an app that we built in collaboration, I believe, with the City of Waterloo that provides that information to members of the public. Inclusionary zoning was referenced, and that's an important policy decision. And the other thing I would say is Vision Zero is something that we're working in collaboration with our area municipal partners, and so that will be a big priority for council coming into this budget cycle around work that we do to implement council's Vision Zero vision. So I would leave it at that for now, but as I mentioned, there are dozens and dozens of projects on this list. There's a website that highlights them all, and this is the function of decades of work in partnership with City of Waterloo, and so we're really proud of what's been achieved and the work that's underway.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think it's important for the community to understand the great work that's being done in that regard. With that, I can't remember if did I take a mover in a mover? Yeah, I did take. Councillor Chapman moved the committee of the whole report. So those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Someone want to move that the committee rise and report? Moved by Councillor Davies, second by Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved I can't move it. It's been moved by Councillor Johnson and seconded by Councillor Deneau that the proceedings in the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes be the same and be hereby adopted and confirmed. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion for third reading of the bylaws, moved by Councillor Schneider, seconded by Councillor Clancy. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Despite best efforts to be finished by 10, it's close, and I'll take a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Owaduni, seconded by Councillor Chapman. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Have a good night, everyone.